It's 8:20 in the eastern part of the United States. We've made some calls. We've got many more to make. Many states we cannot tell you about, but this is our first look at the actual vote count. These are real human beings who cast real ballots all over the country. Only 5% of the precincts reporting, and with that just 5%, you can see George Bush, 54% of the vote, 3.3 million. Al Gore, 45%, 2.7 million. I think we have to say it's a little too early to know whether that represents anything or not. This is the electoral vote that we can tell you at this hour based on the states that we've been able to call, based on our exit polling. And key precincts. Jeff Greenfield helpfully reminds me. George Bush has amassed 121 electoral votes. His states are in red. Al Gore, 119 electoral votes. His states in blue, including the important states we've been able to call in the last half hour of Florida and Michigan. But we are very much keeping an eye on the states in yellow. Those states are still being fought out. We are not able to tell you at this point whether they are Gore or Bush.
And one of the things we're going to be looking at as we go through the evening is the comparison between the popular vote total and the electoral map total. Judy, you're absolutely right, 5% of the vote, huge states left out. That doesn't tell you much. But we do keep reminding people, given the pre-election polls, of at least the possibility this time that one candidate could win the electoral vote and still lose the popular vote. That is a story we'll be following as the night wears on.
It's happened 3 times in the history of the United States.
Yep.
And
but never in the 20th century.
Never in the always
and never
19th century.
And never when we had such a democratic feeling. And it happened at a time when we didn't elect our senators, when women couldn't vote, when blacks in much of the country couldn't vote. But we're not saying this is going to happen by a long shot. We're just saying we're keeping our eye on it.
All right, Jeff Greenfield. Now, what do I do next? Madeline and McCurry, it's my fault. I'm listening too hard to Jeff Greenfield here. Mary Madeline, Mike McCurry, there's a lot to talk to you two about. A number of states have been called, and there are a number of states still out there. Mike McCurry, what do you make of the numbers so far?
Well, I think the numbers are showing what I think we know all along. It's a very, very close election, and it's going to be a long evening. I think the results in Florida have got to be bittersweet for the Bush family. Of course, the brother of Governor Bush, the governor, sitting governor in Florida, that can't be a happy one for the Bush family. But, you know, let's credit Senator Lieberman running for vice president, who practically parked in Florida, worked very, very hard there. And I think we'll also see as we get into behind the scenes of these numbers that the argument that Al Gore made about Social Security and the future of that program really did have some real merit to the voters of Florida. So I think that's very significant. We'll have to see if that stands up as we move west.
Mary, Florida does, as Mike said, have to be a disappointment for the Bush campaign.
Well, I am going to go out on a limb here. We have early data. The spread is 2%. The raw total is 4,000 votes at this point. If it continues at this pace, there are 500,000 absentee ballots out there. I'm just telling you, this reminds me of Duke Majan in California, lost on Tuesday, won on Thursday. I continue.
What are you suggesting, Mary?
I'm suggesting when the real count is in and the absentee ballots are counted, that they are extensive in there, and that state's going to flip. I really feel that way. Now, having said that, there was a strategy to lose Florida and Michigan and carry on and still get to 270 with some of the states that haven't been called yet, but look to be leaning in Bush's direction. But I still feel like that absentee ballot operation there was so extraordinary, and it is documented at 500,000 that it more than covers the spread as it exists right now.
Mike, is that a plausible scenario?
Not a likely scenario. Sounds like a little bit of wishful thinking, but I can understand with the numbers that close how Republicans might still want to think that there's a chance there. But you know, there is something very important. The closeness of these numbers so far, and as we are reporting it and talking about it and reflecting on it, is surely driving up turnout in the West, because people out west who in past elections have been told that their votes aren't going to count are suddenly realizing that there are very large stakes here. It's a very close election, and nobody is running away with it. This may have a real significant impact on turnout out in the Pacific Northwest especially.
Mary, what about the state of Michigan? Clearly, George W. Bush put in, a really strong effort there. I mean, he was in and out of that state a number of times. He certainly fought hard there in the primary, lost that, but there was reason to believe he had a good shot at Michigan.
Well, it was a battleground state. You couldn't just give it up. We have a Republican governor there who worked hard. There are a lot of other things going on in that state, not the least of which was the voucher initiative, which the governor feared would be detrimental to Governor Bush's race there. And you had the heavy union effort. So you couldn't just give it up. But of those big three, it was the one least expected to end up in Bush's column.
All right, Mary Madeline, Mike McCurry, we're going to come back to both of you for some time and throughout this night. I
have one quick point. The UAW got Election Day off as part of its contract for the first time in its history. And I think when people look at Michigan and that union vote that Bill has told us about, once again, John Sweeney, once again, vote poll, Election Day off as a paid holiday, that may have turned Michigan around.
I just want to remind our viewers very quickly the states that we have said where the polls have closed, but still we are not able to call a winner. Ohio, West Virginia, Alabama, Maine, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee. And I'm just told that I've just been made a liar. We are able to call the state of Alabama for Texas Governor George W. Bush. Governor Bush takes the 9 electoral votes in the state of Alabama, also known as the Heart of Dixie.
Also, CNN is calling the Senate race in New Jersey. Millionaire, multi-millionaire John Corzine, who spent more than $60 million, has won the open seat, turning back the challenge by Republican Bob Franks. Corzine, a big winner in New Jersey, having spent lots of money in the process.
That's a hold.
I was going to say, goes to show that for $55 or $60 million, you can buy your way into the United States Senate.
Well, in fact, it's most important in terms of the balance of power. That's Frank Lautenberg's seat, so we count that as a hold for the Democrats. But unlike Al Checkey in California or Michael Huffington in California, this enormous record-busting sum literally paid off.
Back to the race for the White House. If you're just joining our coverage, this is the electoral vote count right now. It's this close. That's right. These figures are correct. Governor Bush with 130 votes. Vice President Al Gore with 119. Bill Schneider, you wanted to make a point about this yellow map, or states here on the map that are yellow. Right. It doesn't necessarily mean what?
It doesn't necessarily mean that those states are very close. It means that we're not ready to call them yet, because in some cases there are unprecedented numbers of absentee ballots. For instance, in North Carolina 4 years ago, 60,000 ballots were cast by absentee. This year, 500,000 were counted absentee. So in many of those cases where the state is yellow, it just means we're not ready to call them yet.
In fact, Mary Madeline was even saying in the state of Florida, even though CNN has called the state of Florida for Al Gore, Mary was making the point that there are something like, I think she said, 500,000 absentee ballots that have
Well, when we do call the state, we've taken the absentee ballot count into account. When we call the state, we're pretty sure that state is going to go for the winner. It's just that when we have a state in yellow, that means we're not ready to call it yet. It doesn't necessarily mean that state is neck and neck.
But then again, it could be neck and neck.
It could be neck and neck, but that doesn't necessarily mean that.
But this is a critically important point. If you're just using exit polls, by definition, you can't count absentee ballots. But when we call a state, or anybody else calls a state, they've weighed that into the equation.
That's right.
Which doesn't mean we can't be wrong.
We don't want to mislead our viewers. Not every yellow state is neck and neck.
David Peeler has been telling us for days, he was just here at the beginning of our coverage, it's been 3.5 hours ago, that Mr. Corzine in the primary alone spent $30 million, and here in the general, another $31 million. So, my, what an expensive seat.
Well, speaking of states that we are not able to call, I'm going to wait 13 seconds until I can say this. In the state of Arkansas, where the polls are closing literally as I speak, the home state of President Bill Clinton, we are not able to call. The polls close in Arkansas at 8:30 Eastern Time, and as of this hour, this moment, we are not able to call the result. The land of opportunity. And looking once again, a quick check of the electoral map. George W. Bush racking up 130 electoral votes. His states are in red. Al Gore, the vice president, 119 electoral votes. His states are in blue. And as Bill Schneider just very carefully pointed out, the states in yellow, We are not able to call them yet. It doesn't mean that they will end up close. It just means we don't have enough information at this hour. Even though the polls are closed, we don't have enough information to put them in one corner or another.
And if I... Okay. Mr. Schneider, I believe you have some data.
Yes, we do. Tennessee and Arkansas, these are states that are too close to call. Now, how did that happen? Well, take a look at the voters in Tennessee. We asked them, oh, here it is from Arkansas. Their opinion of Bill Clinton as a person. These are his fellow Arkansans. 61% have an unfavorable personal view of Bill Clinton. So it doesn't look like Bill Clinton helped Al Gore very much in Arkansas. Now, if we can shift to Tennessee, here's what we find. We asked them, the voters there, in deciding how you'd vote today, how important is it to you that Al Gore comes from Tennessee? And look at this, almost 2/3 of them said, you know, that's really not very important at all. So, if you know, that's one reason why the state is very close. If Al Gore does not carry the state of Tennessee, he'll be the first presidential candidate not to carry his home state since George McGovern in 1972.
And the first, and if he were to win the White House without winning Tennessee, he'd be the first since what? James Polk? James K. Polk. I looked this up today.
Well, it depends on how. Well, let's see. Richard Nixon, no, he didn't win the White House, so you'd have to go all the way back to James K. Polk. Nixon didn't carry California in 1960,
I actually
but he lost.
I covered that campaign, so I can
James
speak
K.
with
Polk?
authority. Yeah.
It's interesting that
I wasn't going to bring that up.
Thanks.
It's interesting you point out in Arkansas how the president is regarded, because one of the things we're going to be looking at is what we call the Clinton factor, and trying to figure out whether people who don't like Clinton as a person somehow put that on Al Gore. In Arkansas, it may be that the negative opinion of Bill Clinton is one of the reasons why maybe that's closer than certainly Al Gore would have hoped.
But weren't the polls showing that at least in some instances, people were willing to overlook Clinton's personal failings in their eyes because they agreed with his policies and saying that they would stick
on Clinton,
theoretically with the vice president.
Here's the line that our colleague Mark Shields often uses. If Bill Clinton drove through a car wash in a convertible with the top down, Al Gore would get wet. It may be that
even if he were in the trunk, I think.
It may be, even if he wasn't in the car, it may be that people are willing to forgive Clinton, but they we're going to find out, but stick Al Gore with the responsibility for what they didn't like. This is something that we'll be finding out through the night.
As they do in the National Football League, I'm going to throw a yellow flag on the anchor desk and say, if you're just joining us, Governor Bush is leading Vice President Gore 130 to 119 electoral votes in the race for the White House. We have much, much more to come. When we come back, Larry King live with a special guest, and Wolf Blitzer bringing us up to speed on the latest on the battle for the Hill and the balance of power. Back in a moment, wherever you're watching in the world.
Who brought down the most infamous lord of the drug trade? Killing Pablo on CNN Perspectives. Sunday, 10 Eastern, only on CNN.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Teddy Bart's Roundtable. Let me set the table and introduce the players. Who says politics can't be fun?
Teddy Bart's Roundtable, mornings from 7 to 9 on 1160 AM WAMB.
Sometimes I cheer too hard. I can't help it. Sports on Demand on digital cable lets me see all the games I want to see. Oh, I've had glove rash, I've had foam burn, I've had fan elbow. Yeah, there's risk involved. I accept that.
Sports in Demand on digital cable. Complete sports packages for total sports fans. Call your cable company today.
No, this was a boating accident.
CNN, America's campaign headquarters.
What's my investment strategy? How about buy things before they go up?
For a personal financial plan, please press 5.
I'm going to pay for this. What was I? This market's still got a lot of upside. This market's going south. Why didn't they write this last month?
Can't believe Dad thought he could check stock prices on this thing.
Okay, 2 of your stocks are up. What about the other 15?
Thank you, Painewebber.
Today, business is composed of 2 worlds. One of brick and mortar, the other a digital reality. And as these worlds continue to grow, one company will be right there, delivering the products and materials needed for success. From the steel that builds our cities to the silicon that builds our networks. Norfolk Southern, moving the goods that move the economy.
An epiphany is a sudden awakening to the essential nature or meaning of things. The day you realize that babies aren't delivered by storks, that was an epiphany. The day you recognize that men and women are not the same, that was an epiphany. The day you realize that your website is your business and your software can't handle the traffic, that is an epiphany. It's a different kind of world. You need a different kind of software.
It is 8:36 in the East Coast. CNN has a call to make, at least 3/4 of a call to make, in the state of Maine. Maine is one of only 2 states in the country that allows its electoral votes to be decided according to congressional district. There are 2 of those districts in Maine. What we can say is that Al Gore will carry 3 of Maine's electoral votes, and Bill Schneider, we are only able to say the 4th electoral vote is undetermined. Can you quickly explain what all this means?
I'll try. Maine has 4 electoral votes. There are 2 congressional districts. It gets 1 electoral vote for each district. If you carry the district, you get that electoral vote. Then if you carry the entire state, you get 2 additional electoral votes, because Maine has 2 electoral votes for the congressional districts and 2 for the state, because it has 2 senators from Maine. So if you carry the state, you get 2. If you carry each congressional district, you get 1 for each district. The other state that does that is Nebraska. It divides its electoral votes up district by district.
At least this much of the Maine result, I think, has to be a personal disappointment for the Bush family. They have a longtime summer home there in Kennebunkport. George W. Bush was in there at least a couple of times campaigning. So, but we will see. Perhaps he'll be able to pull out, one assumes he'll be able to pull out that vote. We don't know. Larry King is in Washington with a special guest.
Thank you, Judy, with 3 special guests. They are the Honorable Ann Richards, former Democratic governor of Texas, Howard Baker, the former Senate Majority Leader, former Reagan Chief of Staff, and Bob Woodward, the Pulitzer Prize-winning assistant managing editor of the Washington Post, right up to what we know right now, they just gave it to Maine. How do you see it, Ann?
I don't know how to call it, Larry, and that is the honest-to-God truth, since I know everything.
You do.
But tonight...
You don't know.
We're not going to know until we get to the West.
Senator Baker.
No, I agree with that. I think that at this point, I had thought and hoped that George Bush would be further along, but it's still too close to call.
Are you disappointed?
Mildly, but it's not over yet. You know, it's not over till we, as Ann says, till we get some more results from the West in particular and from Pennsylvania.
This is a Yogi night.
It is. I mean, so close it's scary.
It ain't over till it's over.
And what's interesting, to take a moment and think about the candidates. I remember talking to George McGovern, who was the Democratic nominee in '72, and he got killed by Nixon. I think McGovern won a single state. And I asked, what were you thinking on Election Day with all the polls showing you have to lose? He said, I thought I was going to win. You, as a candidate, live in a bubble. Now, those 2 candidates, one of them is going to have his heart broken.
But both said it would be close, didn't they? And they kept saying it.
Yeah, but saying it's close and feeling it in your heart, you know, that's another thing. Because you're out there, you've got the crowds, they come to see you, they're with you, and you have to believe that you're going to carry that state. I think both of these candidates were told by their staff and by their pollsters, you're going to win this election. I don't think there's any doubt of that.
Huge black turnout, surprising, Howard?
No, big turnout all over, you know, in every sector of society. It may be, almost certainly will be a record turnout, and, you know, regardless of who wins, that's a marvelous thing.
And that also confounds the experts who predicted, what, 48% would turn out.
I don't know anybody who predicted a massive turnout like we're seeing today.
Why, Bob?
You know,
why are they coming out?
I think people realize that their vote matters, and that it is not just perfunctory, and that you actually go out, and this might be the vote that carries. I mean, Al Gore was running around and saying, 1 more vote in each precinct is the difference.
I was asking it 2 months ago, could we have a popular winner different from an electoral winner?
Yeah, we could, but I don't think that's going to happen. And one of the other things that I think happened tonight, is that the press said this is going to be the closest race in history. That made people believe that their vote was important. The other thing is we had some really hotly contested Senate races. We had some really contested congressional races. Those are things that I'm really interested in, and I think that got the vote out too. And when the vote turns out, the Democrats do well.
Senator, how could Bush lose his brother's state and Gore possibly lose his own state?
Yeah, I think Gore will lose Tennessee. As a matter of fact, you haven't called it yet, but I was with with Bush 5 times in Tennessee, and you could feel the enthusiasm. And I don't know anything about the rest of the country anymore, but I think I know something about Tennessee, and my guess is that Bush will carry Tennessee.
And what about Arkansas?
I think we'll lose Tennessee, and I think it is likely we will lose Arkansas, and I don't think we need them to win.
Going to win Pennsylvania?
I think we'll win Pennsylvania.
You're still holding out on that. Are you surprised Ohio is still out?
Yes. I mean, look, the only wisdom is in the numbers, and we don't have them now.
All right, why is this so close? I mean, one would have made a case the country's in good shape. Clinton didn't campaign, but he's got a 62 to 63 rating. Why is it even close?
I mean, the analysts are going to have to figure that out, but obviously the undecided voters split.
I think that the issues became the same issues in each camp, and the differentiation was very difficult. For example, I know in the exit polling that the issue of being sure that you had Medicare covering prescription drugs, not having it done privately, that should go to Gore's benefit. If Bush should win, Bush is going to win on what is really a Democratic issue. In other words, I think that Bush was able to fuzzy up the issues to the point that people didn't differentiate between where Gore stood and where Bush stood.
Larry, I think that this was an issue-dominated campaign, and I think that's good. I think it probably promoted a vast turnout, which I think almost certainly we're going to see. But there's something else there that we don't know yet, and probably won't know till we've examined the results in a few days. And whether it was fierce competition between Bush and Gore, or the issues, or something else, I don't know. I'm even bold enough to think that the country has decided that elections are important, and that they ought to turn out and vote.
Thinking.
And if they have, that's a major victory for the country.
Well, and also it's quite possible that prosperity mattered. I mean, most people in this country are better off, and that simple fact, which people have told us for a long time can drive an election, may have done it once again.
All 3 of our guests will be back at midnight. We'll come a little after midnight and be with you for the full hour with this outstanding panel. Certainly no mandate here, right?
No, it's not going to happen.
We thank Ann Richards, Howard Baker, and Bob Woodward. In the next hour, we'll talk with the mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani. Right now, back to the national desk in Atlanta on this extraordinary election night. Guys?
A very good guest to have on at the top of the hour, because more polls will be closing, including New York. CNN's live coverage of this election 2000 will continue in just a moment.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by Chrysler and PaineWebber. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. Chrysler, we're reinventing the passion for driving. And PaineWebber. Thank you, PaineWebber.
Looking to save more and spend less this holiday season? With the Chrysler Holiday Sale, you can do just that. Because now you can save over $2,300 when you buy a new 2001 Town & Country with 4.9% financing. Or choose a $299 lease on the award-winning 2001 Chrysler Voyager. So take advantage of the Chrysler Holiday Sale today for savings that let you spend more on a real holiday priority, yourself.
What's my investment strategy? How about buy things before they go up?
For a personal financial plan, please press 5.
I'm going to pay for this. What was I? This market's still got a lot of upside. This market's going south. Why didn't they write this last month?
Can't believe Dad thought he could check stock prices on this thing.
Okay, 2 of your stocks are up. What about the other 15?
Thank you, PaineWebber.
The internet goes everywhere because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us. The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing costs to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
My sister has one of the most devastating forms of arthritis. Dangerous side effects really prevented her from taking medications that would ease her pain. At my pharmaceutical company, we work to discover medicines that are as effective for that pain, but with fewer side effects. To know that we're helping millions of people every day, it's a high point of my career. To know that I've helped my sister is the high point of my life.
We're 13 minutes away from another set of states having their polls closed, having the doors closed, if you will, on the places where voters go to cast their ballots. Let's take a look now at the electoral map at this moment. With George W. Bush has 130 electoral votes. His states are in red. Al Gore, 122 electoral votes. Those states in yellow are the states where we are not yet, at this moment, able to declare a winner. And let's take a look at what those states are. They are New Hampshire with 4 electoral votes, the state of Ohio with 21, West Virginia 5, Pennsylvania, significant battleground state, 23, Missouri 11, Tennessee another 11, the home state of Al Gore, and Arkansas 6. And we are able to call Pennsylvania for Vice President Al Gore. 23 electoral votes go to the Vice President, Jeff Greenfield, Bernie Shaw. This is a major disappointment for George W. Bush, and Jeff makes it all the harder for him to put together a winning combination.
It absolutely does. It means that of the states that are now undecided, we can begin to say that George Bush has to more or less run the table on them. He has got to win Ohio. He has got to win Tennessee and Arkansas. He has got to win Missouri. The polls close at 9 o'clock. New York was never in play. The West Coast hasn't been favorable to the Republicans for a while. So with the loss of Pennsylvania and Michigan and Illinois and Florida, all battleground states, the states that we have left in yellow are the place where George W. Bush's candidacy must prevail if he's to survive across the Mississippi River. It's going to be tough.
Very tough, Jeff. And for the first time tonight, Al Gore has gone up on Governor Bush. The Vice President, 145 electoral votes. The Governor from Texas, 130 electoral votes. And as you say, poll closings coming up at the top of the hour, and we'll see what happens.
Al Gore having exactly half the number needed at this hour. We were able to call Pennsylvania at about 8:48 Eastern time. He now has about half the number, exactly half the number needed. But as Jeff's just said, we've got polls closing in the coming hour. Wisconsin, Oregon, later on tonight,
New
a number
York,
of states.
among others. But right now we're going to go to Nashville, Tennessee and Austin, Texas simultaneously to Candy Crowley and John King. Candy, the Bush people keep giving you scenarios of how they can win without Florida and how they can win without Michigan. Now, at some point, this scenario begins to get a little dicey, doesn't it?
At some point, you run out of electoral votes that are there to be had, particularly when you realize that California has always seemed like very safe Gore territory, despite a Bush effort there. So, yes, Pennsylvania just another big one, and we're running out of battlegrounds and running out of states with major electoral votes. Now, as you know, Bush has made a play for a lot of the 11 electoral votes, 10 electoral votes, all of those states, Tennessee and Arkansas, but it now becomes as you say, it comes to a point where George Bush is going to have to run the table if he's going to stay in this game.
You told us earlier that Jesse Jackson was being dispatched into Philadelphia, that this turnout effort by some of the Gore operatives was going on into the night. Is it their sense now, can you tell us, that they now begin to see, to use a phrase from another generation, the light at the end of the tunnel? John?
Jeff, a lot of people think that it's, just cliche or just conversation to fill out a campaign when we talk about how important the ground war is. Just look at the state of Pennsylvania and look at some key elections in recent years. The election of the Philadelphia Mayor John Street, elections in the Pittsburgh area, the mayor and the city council. In those cases, African Americans in Philadelphia made the difference. Labor unions in the western part of the state made the difference. The Democrats have poured $30 to $40 million of their own money into this, plus money from the labor unions. They believe tonight it is making the difference. They also believe the nonstop campaigning by Al Gore helped out in the last few days, particularly in the state of Florida. Based on their projections now, they assume the state of New York will go their way in the next hour. They think they're going to win by a significant margin in California. They're counting on Washington State. So that's still a battleground worth looking at. They think they're just about 18 electoral votes short of winning the White House if this keeps going. Again, the vice president's still on the phone. Just a few moments ago, I was told, making a phone call into Missouri. The polls still open there, making drive time radio calls into Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. They are much more optimistic here. Cheers among the staff at the Gore Hotel. Cheers in public here in Nashville, as we've just called the big state of Pennsylvania for the vice president.
All right, John King in Nashville, Candy Crowley in Austin. Back here at the studio in Atlanta, let's go quickly to Hal Bruno over at our big electoral map. Hal, what happened in Pennsylvania to pull it together for Gore?
There was a big surprise, Judy. It was over here. He not only won the city of Philadelphia, but he did very well in the suburbs, and he held his own over here in the west, which is the swing section of the state. That's the way he did it.
And he was in, let's look at that tally of how many times these candidates were in the state of Pennsylvania. I have George Bush in there at least 12 times since the conventions, Al Gore in there 13 times. That tells you as clearly as anything, this is a state both these gentlemen felt they needed to have in order to pull this
and so far,
victory
every key big battleground state, Gore has taken them tonight so far. Florida, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Michigan.
Ohio is still out.
Let's take a look at how Al Gore won Pennsylvania. Well, this was absolutely crucial. Let's look at people who decided how to vote in the last 3 days. They voted 53 to 36 for Gore over Bush. Now, only about 1 in 10 voters decided how to vote in the last 3 days, but they gave Gore his margin. It was at the end of this campaign in the last few days that Gore won Pennsylvania. Among the 90% who decided earlier, Bush had a slight edge. So it was just decided in Pennsylvania only in the last couple of days.
Bill Schneider, our coverage will continue in a moment with more poll closings at the top of the hour. Quite a handful of states.
Closed captioning provided by USSearch.com. Find out if anyone you know has a criminal record. One of over 50 information products now available at USSearch.com.
Tonight on Larry King Live Election Day 2000, join me, a special midnight show with Ann Richards, Howard Baker, and others. Tonight on CNN.
Get the pay-per-view movies you want and only what you want. In demand, you rule.
In every war there are faces, ones of hopelessness. In every victory there are faces, ones with hopes and dreams. The fight against cancer is a war we believe we can win. Our work has earned us selection by the National Cancer Institute in a ranking among the top 5% of cancer centers nationwide. Nice accolades, but nothing compared to looking into those faces and telling them they've won a victory over cancer.
In the southern Appalachian Mountains, the biggest problem is strangers. Exotic pests threaten the survival of native species. We are working to protect the beauty and biological diversity of this region. By developing new varieties of trees that are resistant to these pests, we are giving our forests a fighting chance. We are the University of Tennessee.
Hi, I'm Gary Chapman, and these are my office assistants. This is Peaches, and this is Stuart. They came from Happy Tails Humane, Middle Tennessee's only no-kill animal shelter, dedicated to finding a home for every dog, cat, and guinea pig it takes in. You can show your support by donating your time, your money, your services, and maybe even a little love to Happy Tails. Your financial contributions are tax-deductible, and the rewards of taking care of God's little creatures are even better than that. Take it from me, Peaches, Stuart, and lots of other pets. Happy endings begin with Happy Tails.
Stay with CNN, America's campaign headquarters.
Four minutes till more polls close. Let's go straight to the Capitol gang and Al Hunt.
Thanks, Judy. I'm here with Cato Byrne and with Robert Novak. All right, Bob, for weeks we've been talking about Gore has to pull off the political trifecta, Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania. He did it. Where does that leave us?
I think it leaves him just a step from being the next president of the United States. He could do it, I think, by winning his home state of Tennessee, which everybody had thought that Governor Bush was going to win. My information is the returns are not that good for Governor Bush. But then if Bush does, if he's able to get Tennessee, then we move out west to some important states out there, Arizona, Oregon, and before that, Iowa. And those are states that Bush would have to win. He has very little margin of error and not much confidence, I think, in the Bush ranks right now, considering the disappointments they've had so far tonight.
We're in hand-to-hand combat, right, Kate?
Absolutely. With Gore winning those big three battleground states, it's up to Bush now to win all the skirmish states. He's got to win states Bill Clinton carried twice. He's got to win Wisconsin, Oregon, Iowa, New Mexico. He's got to win a couple that have already closed but are too close to call. New Hampshire, as I said, he better hope they're kind of this time around. Ohio, West Virginia. He needs to be greedy about all the smaller states that are still out there because this gives Al Gore such a boost.
You know, one thing I'm struck by, this is primarily looking at the exit polls. In 1980, we talked about Reagan Democrats. After that, in 1992, we talked about some Clinton Republicans. He got some Republican votes. I'll tell you, George Bush is not getting any Democrats, and Al Gore is not getting any Republicans. There will be no mention of Gore Republicans or Bush Democrats, which may create a mandate problem for governance, whichever one of these guys wins, Bob.
But the real story is that the ground war has apparently been won by the Democrats.
Unions, yeah.
The unions came
really
out, the blacks came out, and that's why some of the Republicans I've talked to are a little bit on the pessimistic side, because they've been losing the ground war in state after state. The only other point is that the ground war is most effective with union members and, may I say, African Americans, and in these other states they're perhaps a little less important. I think Tennessee becomes really hugely important. Who would have thought that the battle for Tennessee by Al Gore would be that important?
Tennessee or Missouri, which is going to may stay open late too. Michael Hooley has put together for the Gore people a great get out the vote operation.
Well, the Democrats had a terrific get out the vote operation in '98, and it cost the Republicans some seats, but they promised themselves that they'd match it this time. But it seems as though in the big states they haven't.
And because of the federal judge in St. Louis, we won't know for another 3 hours, will we?
Well, we may not know until tomorrow because there are absentee ballots coming in some states, and there are also going to be some states that may be so close that we'll have no idea. For instance, I think CNN has given 3 votes in Maine to Al Gore, but there's a 4th, which is one CD out there that could be critical in the final analysis. Wouldn't that be a field day for us, Bob Novak?
We can only hope.
That's right. Kate, a final word?
I'm going to stay right here, Al. I'm not going to miss a thing.
We will be back later, though. We now go back to our election headquarters in Atlanta, where it's 9 o'clock in the east, and the polls are about to close in New York, Wisconsin, and New Mexico.
From CNN Center in Atlanta, coverage of Election 2000 continues. Here again, Judy Woodruff, Bernard Shaw, Jeff Greenfield, and Bill Schneider.
And indeed, those polls have closed, and the First Lady of the United States of America will become a senator from New York State. Hillary Rodham Clinton tonight defeating Congressman Rick Lazio.
I think it is safe to say, folks, that we have written a new page in American political history. Not only the First Lady ever to hold public office, someone who moved to New York, a state she had never lived in, someone who in February of 1999 or January watched her husband being acquitted of impeachment charges, and on that very day huddled with Harold Ickes, one of the Clintons' top aides, and started talking about her future, which included, amazingly to some people, a United States Senate seat in New York. One other thing, she got 2 huge breaks. That Rudy Giuliani had to, because of health and personal reasons, not run, and she got a huge break when George Bush became the Republican nominee, taking New York virtually out of the presidential battleground and dumping no Republican help in there. But to her credit, she went upstate, Republican territory, worked for a year and a half, and she is now the United States Senator-elect from New York, and who'd have thunk it a year and a half ago.
Who'd have thunk it?
Staying here in the Empire State, CNN declares the winner, Vice President Gore, picking up New York's 33 electoral votes. Continuing with our poll closings now, Wisconsin, we're not prepared to call this yet. Wisconsin's 11 electoral votes, very, very important this night. In Minnesota, also the same case here, we are not prepared to call Minnesota. When we can, of course, we will. Louisiana, Governor Bush winning tonight there, 9 electoral votes going into his column. In Arizona, again, we're not prepared to call this one, nor are we prepared to call it in Colorado. Colorado with 8 electoral votes hanging out there. Governor Bush, CNN declares the winner in Nebraska, 5 more electoral votes for the Texas governor. We are not going to call New Mexico yet. We'll come back to New Mexico. Rhode Island put in the Gore column, the vice president winning 4 more electoral votes. In North Dakota, Governor Bush wins those 3 electoral votes. As he does in South Dakota, 3 more electoral votes. As he does in Wyoming, still 3 more electoral votes. Now, this is the map as we look at it at this hour. The vice president, 192 electoral votes. Governor Bush, 153.
Bernie, it looks like 11 states we are not able to call yet, but as you point out, the total, Al Gore inching ever closer to 270, but George Bush still within striking distance. But the big story tonight, in addition to watching how these states tally up, is how many of them are being fought out, you know, whatever term you want to use, whether it's a cliche, hand-to-hand combat or whatever, they're still fighting it out on the ground.
It also looks, when you look at that electoral map and you look at that looming West Coast that's been so kind to the Democrats for the last 8 years, that George W. Bush is going to have to win almost everything that is still in play to have a chance because of what may be looming in California. I also think we should probably pause and talk one more second about that Hillary Clinton Senate race, because it is not just another Senate race. I have a very quick story. When Eleanor Roosevelt was a widow, Harold Ickes Sr. went to her in 1945 and urged her to run for the United States Senate from New York. Said, you will be a great tribute to your husband. Eleanor said, I can't do it. He's only been dead a month. I'm not ready to even think about it. So 54 years later, Harold Ickes' son sits with Hillary Rodham Clinton and says, if you come to New York and run for the Senate, we think you can make it. And she has.
And a prime factor has to be her husband, President Clinton, who not only whispered strategy in her ear, but campaigned tirelessly with her.
Yes. I think with this victory, Hillary Rodham Clinton instantly becomes a national figure, or she is a national figure already, but I think she becomes a national Democrat with a very wide national following. Now, if Al Gore wins the election, in a sense, you'll have 2 leading national Democrats, each of whom can claim the Clinton legacy. Al Gore, his selected vice president, and Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, his wife. If there's ever a difference of opinion between, if he's president, Al Gore, and Senator Clinton, won't that be interesting?
Frank Buckley is in New York at Clinton headquarters. What's it like, Frank?
Well, the mood jubilant here, the crowd erupting in cheers as the TV reports of Hillary Clinton being declared the winner came out on the big screen TVs, the people here and the audience cheering. And to pick up on a thread that you were just talking about, yes, Mrs. Clinton did embrace the president in campaigning later on in the campaign. Early, she did not campaign with him very much. The thinking was that they wanted her to be able to establish herself as a candidate, and once she was able to do that, and once it was clear that the people of New York knew that she was running on her own, then they felt very comfortable in bringing the president in. the president's popularity never waning here in New York. So they felt that he was a strong card to bring to the table, and he in fact helped in the final days, especially in bringing out the Democratic base here in New York.
Deborah Fayrick is over at Rick Lazio's campaign.
Well, this is what you're seeing. You're seeing a live picture of the room right now. There was stunned silence when this race was called for Hillary Clinton. No reaction from any members of the crowd who had been cheering wildly every time a state was announced for Governor Bush. No reaction whatsoever. Several people looking visibly upset. One woman left the room. Now, Lazio, we spoke to a spokesperson from his campaign not more than 10 minutes ago, and they were adamant. They said that this thing is not over yet. They were really hoping to get a very big boost from voters between 5 and 7 o'clock, a time that they had deemed sort of Republican voting time. Rick Lazio was at Grand Central Station campaigning. It does not appear to have been enough. Right now, no comment, no reaction as to whether they're going to concede or when they will concede. Rick Lazio has always considered himself the underdog in this race. He was the underdog when he first won election back in 1992 to the House, and he was really hoping to repeat that with another come-from-behind victory. Judy, Bernie?
Bill Snyder, what was persuasive among the voters?
Well, let's look at the voters of New York. To whom does Hillary Rodham Clinton owe a debt of gratitude? And the answer is whom? Women. Women voted 58% for Hillary Rodham Clinton, almost 60%. Phenomenal. Men didn't vote for her. Men voted very narrowly for Rick Lazio. And let me point out that Gore won New York by carrying both men and women. But in Hillary's case, it was women who put her over. What about the carpetbagger issue? We asked voters in New York, has she lived long enough in New York to represent New York effectively? And on the carpetbagger issue, New York voters were split. 50% said they were not concerned that she hasn't lived there long enough. Almost 50% said, yeah, it was an issue of concern. So the carpetbagger issue did not go overwhelmingly against Hillary Rodham Clinton in her effort to become senator from New York. Of course, we know the only other time when someone won a Senate race who had never lived or worked in a state was Robert Kennedy in 1964, also in New York.
68.
This has been a real roller coaster of a race, of a campaign for this woman, you have to say. I mean, she started out, she thought she was running against Rudy Giuliani, and of course we know because of health problems he ended up dropping out. But I mean, it's been up, it's been down, it's been all over the place, and she's taken a lot.
The remarkable thing about this race was that even more than most presidential races, the passions that this race engendered in my home state were astonishing. You heard opinions about Hillary Clinton that were on the one hand, you know, this was a role model, and on the other hand were scabrous. And at first, a lot of traditional Democratic liberals, including women, were very hostile to her. They said she's coming up here because she couldn't deal with her husband. I mean, it was pretty rough, and I do think in part of it was that the Democrats came home on issues. But the other thing was she worked her head off.
Her head off.
Her head.
But how many people were neutral about Hillary Clinton this year? Everyone went into this with a strong feeling one way or another. And what you're saying is that strong feelings against were shifted to
I
some
think,
extent.
if I may, just one quick thing. I think that even the people who were undecided emotionally. They really had problems with her personally. They had problems with the relationship, and they were really had problems if they were Democrats with giving another Republican vote to Trent Lott. I mean, those issues, I think, helped.
That's right. I think it's fair to say that the race was about Hillary. It was not about Rick Lazio, about whom most New Yorkers did not have strong opinions. If men didn't vote for Hillary, it's because they had strong opinions about her, not because they were voting for a man.
All right, Hillary Clinton will be going to the United States Senate, and our man who's keeping an eye on the Senate and the House and the governors tonight is Wolf Blitzer. Let's go straight to you, Wolf.
Well, Judy, let's take a look at what's happening in the U.S. Senate. First of all, with this pickup in Minnesota, Mark Dayton defeating the incumbent Rod Grams. Right now, the Republican holdovers, 35. Democratic holdovers, 31. As of right now, there have been 12 Republicans who have been elected, 13 Democrats. That suggests that there's still only a few races left to go before the final outcome is determined. Let's go to some of those races that we can now call. 9 undecided Senate races, by the way, we're still waiting for. In Wisconsin, Herb Kohl, the incumbent, has defeated John Gillespie, the Republican. In Arizona, John Kyle, he had no Democratic opponent, easily winning in the Arizona re-election. In New Mexico, Jeff Bingaman, the incumbent Democrat, re-elected, defeating Bill Redmond. In Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee, the Republican incumbent, appointed has been reelected, defeating Bob Weygand. In North Dakota, Kent Conrad, the Democratic incumbent, he has been reelected. In Wyoming, Senator Craig Thomas, he has been reelected. Stuart Rothenberg, so far in all of these Senate races, including Mrs. Clinton's in New York State, they seem to be going as the polls, the final poll numbers had suggested.
I think you're right, Wolf. I think so far things have been predictable. The biggest problem for the Democrats is the defeat of Chuck Robb. If they had held on to that seat, they would have had some leeway in picking up these other Republican seats that are yet to come, Michigan and Missouri and the like. They're going to need wins in most of those states. The one race I think that's notable that you just mentioned was Rhode Island, a state that went for Al Gore for president. It was held by Lincoln Chafee. He was appointed to the seat after his father passed away. It's a Democratic state, but he held it as a Republican.
Even incumbency for a short term has its advantages. Let's take a look at some of the gubernatorial races. Governor Jeanne Shaheen has won her bid to be reelected in New Hampshire. That was too close to call earlier in the evening. And in North Dakota, John Hoeven, the Republican, defeating Heidi Heitkamp. A lot of people had watched that race in North Dakota.
You're right. That was regarded as a toss-up. The Republican governor decided not to seek re-election. She has had medical problems. Some question would evoke some sympathy. But Hoeven, the Republican, in a Republican state, eked out a win.
Two ballot initiatives also we're now ready to say in Colorado, both of these statewide ballot initiatives. Colorado passed the gun control initiative that does now require background checks at gun shows. Also, Colorado passed the medical marijuana initiative that allows marijuana to be used for medical purposes in the state of Colorado.
Well, Wolf, these ballot measures give the voters a clean shot at issues. Unlike candidate races where there are lots of issues involved and there's personalities as well, these are very focused on issues.
And Stuart, we're also monitoring all of the 435 races in the House of Representatives, all up for grabs right now. About 25% of those races have been determined, and what we're seeing is so far no pickups for the Democrats or the Republicans.
Wolf, very few House races were in play this year. There haven't been any turnovers yet. It won't take very many to get the Democrats to creep up toward a majority. There is a barn burner going on in Florida's 8th Congressional District in Orlando based, a Republican open seat, where at the moment the Republican Rick Keller has a very narrow 1,000 vote advantage with over 90% of the votes cast. That's the race we're looking at right now.
And that's the seat that Bill McCollum gave up. He ran unsuccessfully for the U.S. Senate as a Republican, former House impeachment manager. Stuart Rothenberg, thank you. Back to the National Desk.
Okay, thanks very much, Wolf. An observation about Mrs. Clinton's win in New York State. It seems to me she's paraphrasing a famous line from Vice President Gore's convention acceptance speech in Los Angeles. I am my own woman, against the backdrop of her problems with her husband.
Well, when you think that it was the day her husband had such huge troubles of his own that she announced that she was striking out on her own, I think that leads you to draw that conclusion.
Yeah, a lot of people admired her. Some criticized her, of course, for sticking with her husband and standing by him in all of his ordeal. I think most of the people who voted for her were Clinton supporters, but some might have said, you know, we're going to vote for her as a statement.
I've just been told that there's already a Wire story moving, and I'm sorry I can't credit the Wire service, that there's word that Hillary Clinton will likely serve on the Senate Health, Labor, and Education Committee. That's a Senate committee that Senator Edward Kennedy has long been associated with. I think he's the ranking Democrat there.
I mean, it's a nice irony. She is her own person now. I think it's fair to say that she got where she got, A, because she was First Lady of the United States. Second, a figure who was often seen in harsh terms, especially after the health care debacle, who was seen as a figure of sympathy because of what her husband put her through. And also succeeded in New York in part because Bill Clinton that is the state where he is probably as popular, and even personally, despite everything, as any state in the country. So it's that interesting transition. She's her own person who got where she is because she was married to her husband, and then used that to go beyond that. Fascinating story.
Very fascinating. Wherever you're watching in the United States, wherever you're watching around the world, don't go away. When we come back, we have much more to report on this election night 2000.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by America's Pharmaceutical Companies and Ditech.com. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. America's Pharmaceutical Companies and Ditech.com. Home loan savings direct from the lender.
My
My sister and I grew up near the beach, so our lives were always kind of focused on water. My sister has one of the most devastating forms of arthritis. In fact, getting out of bed in the morning was like stepping on broken glass. Lots of pain and stiffness, swelling of her joints. Like millions of arthritis sufferers, dangerous side effects really prevented her from taking medications that would ease her pain. At my pharmaceutical company, we worked for about 8 years to discover medicines that are as effective for that pain and inflammation, but with significantly fewer side effects. To know that we're helping millions of people every day, it's a high point of my career. To know that I've helped my sister is the high point of my life.
Here now, a CNN major battleground call. Governor Bush is the winner in Ohio, and he grabs the Buckeye State's 21 electoral votes.
This is a state that he absolutely had to have, given what happened in Florida, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. It is also a state Republicans have to have because they just don't win the White House without it, especially with the loss in Illinois. And it now suggests that there is at least a little more optimism, not optimism, but at least hope on the Bush camp. That's right, hope. Because if you look at all the other states, before we get west, if Bush can win Tennessee, Arkansas, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, if the electoral map begins to stabilize.
It's also a
CNN is making another call right now. Governor Bush moving very quickly in Tennessee, embarrassing Vice President Gore by snatching his state's 11 electoral votes.
Yes.
We wish to make a correction about something that was said earlier. I believe that Woodrow Wilson got elected president without carrying his home state of New Jersey.
The second time.
Yeah, that's right. The second time, in 1916.
So any of you taking notes, please jot that down on your chart. But this
and there was James Polk who won the presidency without Tennessee.
Yes, but having won Tennessee, having won the vice president's home state, this scenario for Bush now begins to look at least conceivable. You can see the Bush people saying, okay, if we take Arkansas, if we take Missouri, if we take Wisconsin, if we take Minnesota and Iowa, this is what it's come down to, then we get to the West with enough electoral votes that we can withstand a loss in California.
But
I'll tell you, friends, it becomes more and more interesting as every state is called.
It's really seesaw. Look at that. It's Gore now has 192, Bush 185, according to my quick computation.
I'd call Ohio the Keep Hope Alive state for the George Bush campaign. And what we found in the exit poll is that one of the reasons why he won it was gun owners. A lot of gun owners. 40% of the voters in Ohio were gun owners, and they went almost 60% for George W. Bush.
We should say, too, that about Ohio, that it's been about a week and a half that Al Gore pulled his ads from that state because the polling information they were doing inside their campaign told them they really didn't have much of a shot. They pulled out a good bit of money.
And if we go back to our keys and we talk about social issues, the gun ownership issue was one that the Gore campaign thought was going to drive women away from Bush. At least in Ohio, we can at least make the speculation that working class Democrats, gun owners, had a problem with Al Gore's gun control stand. We'll find out a little later.
But Bill Clinton won that state twice. Ohio was in the Clinton camp both in 1992 narrowly and in 1996 narrowly.
That's right. Now it's back to the Republican camp where it has been most often.
Because Bill Clinton didn't suffer on those social issues the way Al Gore might be. I think what we're trying to say again and again is that the more states that are called, the more this race takes on the fascinating perspective that we thought it would be before the polls ever opened. We don't know who the next president of the United States is going to be. We may not know for an hour and a half, 2.5 hours. Who can say?
Yep, and in Pennsylvania, in a number of these states, it was the late-breaking voters who appear to have made the difference. They clearly delivered Pennsylvania for Al Gore, which was going for Bush early on. They shifted in the last few days.
Bill, I want to, just for clarification, if we have a minute to do this, it's, 9:20 on the East Coast. The polls closed in Ohio almost 2 hours ago. Help us understand the process. I mean, in some of these states, just so our viewers can understand, we've been able to call the state literally the moment the polls closed. Not the case in Ohio. What had to happen in the interim for us to be able to call it?
I think what we had to do was look at some key precincts in Ohio to find out what was actually going on in the real vote, because our exit poll wasn't definitive enough to allow us to call Ohio. There was too much margin of error. So we had to look at the real votes as they started to be counted. And we have precincts selected around the state of Ohio. People call in and tell us the vote totals in those precincts, and those are real votes, and they help us look at the exit poll and see if the exit poll is giving us a strong clue. And also, if there are a number of absentee ballots out, they usually count those very quickly. We look and see how the absentee ballot count is going.
If you're just joining us, you've missed a lot, but there's still a lot more to come. This is how the electoral map looks right now at 20 minutes after 9 Eastern Time. Texas Governor George Bush is leading slimly, 185 electoral votes to Vice President Gore's 182. As I say, lots of excitement so far, but still lots more to come given the closeness of those numbers.
It is remarkable, Bernie. I mean, any which way you cut it. There's a lot to look out for there. All the states in yellow, I think it's, 9 states now, if you count at least a portion of the state of Maine, which we've, given 3 of its 4 electoral votes to Al Gore. We don't know, we can't say who the other one will go to. One has to assume it's got to go to either Gore or Bush, but we don't know.
Would you mind one piece of preliminary conceivable mischief to put on the table?
How about 2 pieces?
It's all right. Well, the first one is if these states break a certain way, we could wind up with a 269 tie with no one getting a majority of electoral votes. It is not out of the question yet. And then we'll be here till January, folks.
Right in these very chairs in this very studio. Do you think they'd feed us?
Then it will go to the House of Representatives, and it will go to the new House of Representatives, and we don't know how that's going yet.
When we come back, John King, Candy Crowley in Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee. We'll check in to see what they're saying and what they're thinking when we come back.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing cost to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
My dad wouldn't have called this retirement. I mean, who would have
When do I get to retire from managing my money? Now that I have
trustees.
7 grandkids.
Kind of funny how investing was easier when I didn't have any money.
Titanium bikes are overrated.
I always thought earning money was the hard part. Keeping it's the real job. I wonder, should we take the income?
Should we reinvest?
Thank you, Payne Weber.
The internet goes everywhere because of us. The internet is more reliable because of us. The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us. The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
Does everybody know what this is? A heart. It's called the silent killer. 50 million Americans alone suffer from high blood pressure. There are no symptoms, yet high blood pressure is the primary cause of heart disease, the #1 killer of men and women in the United States. 19 years ago, the first ACE inhibitors were discovered at my pharmaceutical company, and these drugs have found tremendous potential in the treatment of high blood pressure. But there are still millions who are unable to lower their blood pressure with medication. Their elevated pressure is a time bomb waiting to go off. That's why we're developing this new medicine, and it has excellent effectiveness in treating blood pressure. Maybe by the time these kids are my age, we'll have found a way to prevent high blood pressure in everyone.
welcome viewers watching CNN's election night coverage around the world on CNN International. You are witnessing a cliffhanger as Al Gore and George Bush battle to become 43rd President of the United States. Look at the closeness of this race at 25 minutes past 9 p.m. Eastern Time. The Texas governor with 185 electoral votes. Nipping at his heels, the Vice President of the United States, Al Gore, with 182. And Judy Woodruff standing by to report on the polls that close at about 35 minutes.
And we should do some, I wouldn't call it speculation, but just look ahead. Look at this map and see what it tells us. Well, the map has disappeared, so I'll tell you. We look at this map and we see that through the Midwest, you've got these states that have yet to be called, the Midwest and the South. You've got Iowa, which hasn't closed yet. You've got Missouri, too close to call. Minnesota and Wisconsin, we can't call yet. And West Virginia with 5 electoral votes. Now, look west. By every poll number, even though the Bush people made a play for it, the Gore campaign has to be looking at the state of California with its 54 electoral votes as though they were looking at a prime sirloin about to be served to them.
And we should point out, they spent all of $100 in the state of California, while the Bush people spent something like $12 million, and the Republican committee.
But if you look at those states that have yet to be decided in the middle of the country, and just for the sake of argument, Bush takes them, and then you move west, and Bush takes those states, those sort of in the Mountain West, and Gore takes California, the speculation that what we've been doing all week becomes true. States like Washington and Oregon and maybe Nevada and maybe New Mexico, which we can't yet call, may be the states that hold the balance of power. This is not the kind of case where in elections past we sat here really knowing that there was no way for the inevitable to be forestalled. We don't know how these states are going to break, and we may be looking still at an incredibly close contest.
And it's crazy to try to make a prediction, because we've seen that many of the states that predictably were counted in one corner were not going to be going that way this year until the very end, when all the votes were counted.
And still, the only states outstanding, aside from the races that we are not prepared to call yet, Judy, you've got 2, 4, 5 states at 10 o'clock, and then Idaho, Iowa, Montana, Nevada, Utah. Then I have California, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and at midnight, those 4 I just quoted are from 11 p.m. At midnight, there's just one outstanding state, Alaska.
And just 3 electoral votes.
It does seem, though, that the fears of the Bush campaign in one sense have been realized, or at least their plan B. If they were going to lose Florida and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Illinois, all of which they have lost, their argument was, okay, we can swoop up electoral votes in all those second-tier states like Missouri and Wisconsin and Minnesota. No offense to those states, they just have fewer electoral votes. That's what they're going to have to do to make this race close before you get out to the West Coast.
A lot of things have to come together. One thing that has come together tonight, it's something for the First Lady. We called it about 27 minutes ago, and that is that she has won a Senate seat from the state of New York. And for a little reaction from somebody who's been covering the White House, let's go to John King. You're in Nashville, John, but we understand you're privy to the thinking of none other than President Clinton.
That's right, Judy. And since you last visited Nashville, we should tell you they've started the music here at what Al Gore hopes will be a victory party. Well, I was checking in on the president, actually, to see what he was doing on behalf of the vice president, and it was during a telephone conversation with Las Vegas radio station KCET to make a pitch to voters in Nevada to vote for the Vice President Gore that we called that Senate race for the First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. The president saw that, and he told the radio station, quote, "I'm the first president in history with a wife in the Senate, and I like it." We're also told at this hour the president helping the First Lady work on her speech. He interrupted his radio calls on behalf of the Vice President to help the First Lady prepare her acceptance speech, her big historic moment tonight in New York. Back to you.
All right, John King also joining us, I think, from Austin, Texas. Candy Crowley. Candy, you're there. Thoughts from some of the folks around Governor Bush at this hour? I know you've been listening to some of what Jeff Greenfield is saying about how even though it's harder for Governor Bush to put a 270 together, it's still very possible.
Absolutely, and it's still very possible to them. Obviously, they're heartened by Ohio, but they always had Ohio in their column. They really needed that one, but it's a major boost. It was certainly a major boost to this crowd, which when they heard it, and I think you can hear them now, CNN is on a big screen, so they know when they're on TV. When Ohio was called for Bush, it was a big energizer for this crowd. It's bound to be in the Bush campaign as well. Look, I should also tell you that the Bush campaign, despite the fact that we have called both Florida and Pennsylvania for Vice President Gore, they don't believe it's over yet in those two states, just to put that in there. So they're still fighting. They also were on the phone knowing that the West Coast becomes more and more important. But I will tell you, looking at this map and putting these electoral votes together, one of the things that the Bush strategist always believed was that it might come down to places like Tennessee, like Arkansas, like Wisconsin. And in fact, in the last day of this campaign, George Bush was in Wisconsin, Iowa, Arkansas, in Tennessee, all of which now bode very heavily in terms of how this campaign is going to come out.
Candy, can I just ask you, if they're looking west, the Bush campaign, and they must be at least dealing with the possibility that California, Washington, and Oregon may all go to Gore, then they've got to be, they're just about out of states, aren't they? They have to win almost everything left out that hasn't yet been decided for them to get to 270. I mean...
Yes, except for I can tell you that they are not about to concede Oregon or Washington. Bush made a major play for both of those states. He was in California till the very end, and while that seemed like California dreaming, they do not believe that Oregon and Washington were pipe dreams. They believe they have real chances there, and as you know, Ralph Nader is a factor, so that gives them a boost as well.
Candy, you say you're suggesting that maybe there was some dreaming going on in California, but it was expensive dreaming. I mean, didn't the Republican Party spend $12 million added to another million or so on the part of the Bush campaign for California? They must have thought they had a real shot. Or have a real shot. I don't want to talk in the past tense here.
I have to tell you that every time we talk to them about California, because it's been trending so Democratic over the past couple of elections, they would say, look, no, we believe we have a real shot here. Now, part of that was based on turnout. They had a very aggressive turnout effort in California. But there were also those candidates down ballot. And in California, Republicans have felt abandoned by presidential candidates in the past. And George Bush felt a real obligation to be in California until the very end for the California Republican Party. So he was there. He made a major effort there, both in monetary terms and in time terms. They always said, look, we've got a chance in California, but a lot of it had to do with the California Republican Party and all of those Republicans down ballot.
Candy Crowley, John King, thank you. We'll be back with more of our continuing coverage this election night 2000 from CNN headquarters in Atlanta and our correspondents in the field.
Log on to CNN.com for all the Election Day information you need, from the latest polls, projections, and results on demand. It's all at CNN.com.
Center now? Yeah. I think you're going the other way. I'm going the other way? No, now you're doing it well. Yeah, that's the way. That's how you're doing it. Strong triumph and beautiful as
More women choose Baptist.
Are you ready? McClure's.
Ann Richards, Howard Baker, and more on a special midnight edition of Larry King Live tonight on CNN.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing costs to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us.
The internet goes everywhere because of us. The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
Chris was like my shadow. She was always there. For 3 years, she'd drive down from her job at Kraft to tutor me. My grades went way up.
For 40 years, the Philip Morris companies, including Kraft, have given to programs like Chicago's Off the Street Club, and our employees have volunteered their time to help make a difference in people's lives.
When she left to have a baby, I told her I hoped she'd have a daughter. She already did a great job helping to raise a son.
Working to make a difference, the people of Philip Morris.
"25 minutes away from another set of poll closings. Let's take a look at that great big electoral map at this hour. Look at the states that have been called, those that have not been called yet. And you can see we are at about 180 some electoral votes. I think it's 185 for George W. Bush, 182 for Al Gore, at least by my last count. And let's talk to Hal Bruno now, while we're thinking about maps, about some of those states that are still outstanding that we're not able to call yet. Hal.
Judy, let's talk about 3 Midwestern battlegrounds that are absolutely crucial. Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Missouri. First of all, Wisconsin. Madison, that's where Ralph Nader is doing a lot of harm to Al Gore. He's running with about 6 or 7% of the vote there, and that should be a Democratic stronghold. Gore is doing very well in Milwaukee, and George Bush is doing good in the rest of the state like he's supposed to. But what's hurting Gore is Ralph Nader in the Madison area. Going on to Missouri, if I can get the Madden machine to work right, okay? All right, we'll go to Minnesota. In Minnesota, Al Gore is doing very well in Minneapolis, and then he's doing surprisingly well in the Minneapolis suburbs. So it's sort of a repeat of what happened over in Philadelphia. However, up here in the Iron Range country, which should be, well, Bernie, take it away. Something's happening here.
Well, we'll come right back to you. CNN declares that Vice President Al Gore wins Minnesota's 10 electoral votes. And you were just making the point about his voting strength in various parts of the state and surprisingly having done well outside in the suburbs.
Doing well in the Minneapolis suburbs, and Ralph Nader was not as much a factor there as he was down in Wisconsin. Now let's talk about Missouri. Missouri is a crucial state. Okay, we don't have time for Missouri, we'll do it later.
Well, we always have time for the Show Me State, but we just want to talk about some of the things behind that victory in Minnesota. But here now is the very latest count. Vice President Gore still slightly ahead of Governor Bush in the electoral vote total, 192 to 185. CNN just declaring Mr. Gore the winner in Minnesota.
And if you look at this map once again and cast your eyes out west to where everybody has expected for most of this campaign to happen in California, you begin to see that the states begin to close around the hopes of George W. Bush. There are simply fewer and fewer places where he can pick up enough votes to get to 270 unless an amazing upset happens out west.
But we should keep in mind, as Candy Crowley just told us from Austin, where she's talking to the Bush people, she said they have not entirely accepted the notion, as we and some other news organizations have called it, that Florida and Pennsylvania will end up in Al Gore's camp. She said they are still looking at absentee ballots. They are not ready to concede those 2 states yet.
Mm-hmm. And while it's clear he's running out of real estate. Why do I have the feeling that there are going to be some races contested?
Well, I think it's possible in a really, really close race. What we haven't reported, of course, are the margins in these states. You have a very good point, Bernie. If some of these states come down to a couple of thousand votes each, that's exactly what we can expect to happen. But I think here, Bill, we've been talking about how issues like the environment and guns may have hurt Al Gore in some places, but surely in the suburbs around Minneapolis, those are the kinds of issues that play pretty well.
Well,
yeah, that was the point Hal Bruno was just
talking
making.
About all that is Hal Bruno. Hal, let's go back to you for the rest of your explanation about Minnesota.
Yeah, it all happened so fast. Al Gore did very well within the Twin Cities, but what was surprising, as we said, is in the Minneapolis and St. Paul suburbs, he did much better than expected, and he did well up here in the Iron Range country. George Bush did fine in the rest of the state, but it was up there in the Iron Range and in those Minneapolis suburbs and the Twin Cities itself where Al Gore won it, and Nader was not the factor in Minnesota that he's been in other places.
Okay.
Well, I think it's important. I think it's important at this time to recap that we still have, as we look back at that big electoral map a minute ago, about 8 or 9 states that we are not able to give to either Al Gore or George W. Bush. Right?
That's right. And Bush's, I think, last hopes remain in the West, and he's got to pull a real hat trick to pull some of those Western states. Now let's take a look at how it was that Al Gore carried Minnesota. Well, you know, a third of the voters of Minnesota voted for Jesse Ventura. He won on a bare plurality. Let's take a look at how the Jesse Ventura voters went in the state of Minnesota today. And according to our exit poll, they went for Al Gore. I can tell you they went for Al Gore by a bare majority. 51% for Gore, 38% for Bush, 9% for Nader, the third-party candidate. So it's pretty clear to me that, with Minnesota, a divided state, the Ventura vote was crucial for Al Gore, even though he did not endorse Al Gore.
Which also tells us something about George W. Bush's attempts, or lack of it, to pick up the reformer mantle of one John McCain. You'll remember that after McCain beat him badly in New Hampshire, suddenly George Bush described himself as a reformer with results. Right. He never really stressed that point, except in terms of Social Security and education reform, but on issues like campaign finance reform, he was pretty quiet, and that may be one explanation of why the Ventura vote did not.
Ventura did not endorse Bush or Gore. He said he might vote for Jerry Hagelin or a third minor party candidate, but that vote seems to have gone very heavily for Al Gore and was the key to Minnesota.
Despite the presence of Nader.
Despite the presence of Nader. That's right. The Ventura vote, a lot of it, 9% went for Ralph Nader, but clearly most of it went for Al Gore.
We should also point out that Minnesota does tend to be a very Democratic state. It was in 1984, Walter Mondale, his home state, the only state that they carried. Sure. Dukakis carried that state. But it's interesting, Bill, we've been hearing about the Dukakis notion that so many states were in play. It turns out at least Gore picked up one of them. Bernie?
Let's go to Washington. What do you suppose Mary Madeline and Mike McCurry are thinking now, being the partisans they are, as they analyze the data as we reported? Mary, to you first.
Well, I'd want to reiterate the competition in Florida and Pennsylvania isn't over, but as the Bush campaign looks west of the states that you've been looking at, there is a way to add 33 states up to the 270 plus. And as they went to bed, as you will, and as our exit polls seem to be suggesting, even though we're not talking about them, Bush is leading in all those states. Yes, it's threading the needle, as we say, but they see their way there and, again, are not giving up on Pennsylvania and Florida.
Michael.
If you talk to the Gore campaign folks, they say the news tonight are the news. New Mexico, New Hampshire, 2 states that they really went out and tried to win as if it was a New Hampshire primary contest. They've thrown everything at those 2 states. I was not surprised to hear John King report a little bit earlier that even the president has been doing turnout calls out west. They've got a very massive mobilization effort underway right now that they think will bring it home for the vice president by the time that the evening is over. One other thought, we haven't talked about this tonight too. The closeness of this race is not generating any kind of mandate at the congressional level in either the Senate or the House for either one of the 2 presidential candidates. We have to start thinking a little bit about what kind of shape both candidates will be in to govern if they end up with a very divided electorate and a very divided Congress come next January.
Please address this question. First, you, Mary. Why do you suppose Rick Lazio lost tonight to Hillary Rodham Clinton?
Well, I think we addressed this earlier. There are 2 million more Democrats in the state of New York. He only campaigned for 5 hours. 5 months, and he didn't have the entire weight of the White House behind him. He wasn't able to bed people in the Lincoln bedroom for fundraisers. He wasn't able to use the president to drop photos out of the White House. He was at a serious disadvantage up against a formidable foe who had all of this at her back, all of these advantages of the incumbency of the White House.
Mary missed one very important fact. Hillary Clinton worked her heart out. She went all over that state, even upstate New York, where sometimes Democrats are not greeted warmly. She went and really did convince the people of New York that she wanted to be their senator, and that message sent her to the Senate tonight.
Bernie, let me make a point about this. Hillary Clinton went state shopping for a Senate seat. She has grown up in Illinois. She lived in Arkansas. She looked for a state where there was a significant Democratic registration advantage. She's no dummy, but she ran a very dull campaign, said absolutely nothing. Yes, it was methodical, but it had nothing to do with anything that she has ever done in her life or any state that she's ever lived in.
Neither of you has mentioned a person I alluded to earlier here. I happen to believe that her husband whispering strategy into her ears and campaigning with her was a major factor. Now, allow me to turn that point to the national presidential race and ask you, would this race be as close as it is between Al Gore and Governor Bush had President Clinton campaigned doggedly for and with Al Gore? Mary, you first.
Well, if Al Gore loses, and that's a distinct possibility if people continue to vote just because states are being called, the West still has to get out there and vote. Of course, it's what the Democrats will charge, but our own polls here at CNN said that 40% would be less likely to vote for the vice president if Bill Clinton was out there. I'll say again, he had to become his own man or campaign as his own man, as it were, but Bill Clinton was a drag on him with those very voters that he needed at the end, and I think he made one of the few right decisions of that otherwise badly run campaign.
I couldn't disagree more. The story tonight is turnout, momentum, mobilization. The president has been a very key part of the Democratic effort to turn out the base of the Democratic Party tonight, which loves this president. And I think if the vice president wins tonight, a very large part of the reason is because the Bill Clinton Democratic Party came home and came back to the center. We are all new Democrats now. That is the legacy that the president gave to the vice president, and that's probably why the vice president will win.
Excuse me, minority voters in urban centers and the union vote are not new Democrats, and God forbid that Al Gore does get elected. It'll be impossible for him to govern with this old liberal Democrat coalition. They are not even of this century. Those will be the groups that are responsible for why he's ahead in some of these states now, and how he's going to appeal to them and still govern for the rest of the nation in some semblance of a new Democratic posture is impossible to fathom.
As referee, I'm going to step in here and say, go to your corners for a moment. And you're in Washington.
You think Mary's going to jump on the inaugural platform of Four Winds and try to drag him away?
Well, they're in Washington, and we're going to check in with our man Wolf Blitzer, who will give us a little bit about an idea of how things look in the balance of power on the Hill right now. Wolf?
Bernie, we've been spending a lot of time talking about the Senate, sometime about the governors. We now have the first pickup in the House of Representatives. The Democrat Brad Carson defeating Andy Ewing. This is a seat that was given up because Representative Tom Coburn, the Republican, was retiring. A Democrat has now picked up that seat in Oklahoma. In Connecticut, look at this. Representative Sam Gadenson is trailing the Republican Robert Simmons. Gadenson, 20-year veteran in the U.S. Senate, the ranking Democrat on the House International Relations Committee. In Pennsylvania, a very close race between Melissa Hart and Terry Van Horn. The Democrat and the Republican were in a bitter battle, very close right now, still very tight. We can't call this race. Let's come back to that later, but for now, let's go back to Judy on the National Desk.
Wolf, we have some video we want to show you right now. Just a few minutes ago, Governor Bush in a Texas hotel suite with his wife, Laura. Let's listen in to some of this.
You just happened to be calling when about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Careful. Photo dogs, y'all are a lot a little harder. Be careful.
Yeah, good. Well, call me when you hear something. Thanks. That was the governor of Pennsylvania. Well, he's not conceding anything, and I'm not either in the state of Pennsylvania. Nor are we conceding anything in Florida. I know you've had all these projections that you've been reading about, but the people are actually counting the votes. Rooney, you need to... I had a strong statement to make. My man Bruni's technology went down the tubes on it. This was Governor Ridge calling. Just happened to be calling when I came up, and he doesn't believe the projections. He believes there's a lot of votes still outstanding. We've had heavy turnouts in what he calls the T of Pennsylvania. We're getting the same report out of Florida as well. The networks called this thing awfully early, but the people are actually counting the votes are coming from a little different perspective. And so, pretty darn upbeat about it.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Pardon me? Yeah. It's the first time in... Well, we're... Western returns. That's why I'm here. I'm trying to read something else. Not at all. I don't believe some of these states that they call, like Florida. I just don't believe that we've got enough evidence to be able to call a state. We're actually counting the votes. And as I told you, in some of these counties where we had vote total projections, we're doing better than we thought. And but I feel fine. No, it's been a close race. As I said, I guess it's a limited opponent. It's going to be a close race one way or the other. That's the whole future. And I'm not worried about being there. It is going to be a late night, I will tell you this.
Television cameras allowed into the hotel suite there in Austin, Texas, where Governor George W. Bush watching returns with his father, former President George Bush, his mother Barbara, his wife Laura, and others in the room. And what we heard was Governor Bush on the phone with Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge, who is saying he doesn't believe that Pennsylvania has gone for Gore, as CNN and other news organizations have called that state. He also said he's not ready to concede Florida and its 25 electoral votes. And frankly, if Jeff and Bernie and Bill, if Governor Bush is correct, that would make a huge difference. We're talking about 48 very important electoral votes that he's not conceding.
That's right. Those two states, Pennsylvania and Florida, both have Republican governors, one of whom is his brother. And I think he is still counting on those Republican governors. Tom Ridge in Pennsylvania, a very close friend of Governor Bush, and his brother in Florida, and for that matter in Michigan, he didn't mention that, but John Engler, one of his earliest supporters, all Republican governors, he's probably counting on them to deliver and to prove the networks wrong.
Yes, and Governor Ridge apparently telling Governor Bush that in the T of Pennsylvania, there's still lots of votes out.
I did hear, just quickly, Governor Bush, when he talked to reporters mid-afternoon, he said his parents were, in his words, nervous about tonight. He said, I feel confident, but they're nervous.
Well, I think if your parents were looking at you to be the first man since John Quincy Adams to succeed a father into the White House, you'd be nervous. I mean, you get nervous when your kid's in a high school play. But I think in fairness, look, these projections are not infallible. There are times when the networks have to eat a hearty portion of crow. It happened to Senator Bob Smith in New Hampshire in 1996. The networks called it for his opponent, had to bring it back. But I think, Bill, and you're the maven on this one, that generally networks do not call unless they have a pretty high degree of assurance, correct?
That is correct. We have a pretty high degree of assurance that Florida and Pennsylvania have gone for Al Gore. Bernie mentioned a second ago the T of Pennsylvania. That may be a little mysterious, but that's the largely rural area of Pennsylvania in between the Philadelphia area and the Pittsburgh area. people in Pennsylvania, you must be spent a lot of time there. They call that the T because it's sort of a T-shaped area. Very, very rural and usually heavily Republican. That's why Governor Bush says he's relying on the T, that rural Republican area, to deliver.
In both those states, Bill, in the case of Florida, where the polls closed at 7 o'clock Eastern, in Pennsylvania, where the polls closed at 8 o'clock Eastern, in neither instance did CNN, as far as we know, and that's all we know about at this point, we didn't call it at that moment. We did wait for some of those so-called key precincts from around the state to come in.
I want to make one point about this as we talk about Pennsylvania and Florida and Michigan. In American politics, finger pointing is absolutely an Olympic sport. And you just wonder if the news continues to be not so great for Governor Bush, how many people immediately are going to be saying, you never should have gone to California, you never should have dumped those millions of dollars into that state, you should have saved them for the battlegrounds.
Well, we already heard some of that a little bit earlier tonight from, I believe it was Scott Reed we were talking to. In fact, Jeff, I think you asked him the question, you know, what are some of the second guessing going to be? And that was part of it.
That's my favorite part of the campaign. I call it recriminations. When someone loses, you can have fun for weeks with everyone blaming everyone.
They should have listened to me.
That's right. That's what they all say.
They should have listened to me.
Stand by. CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column. 25 very big electoral votes in the home state of the governor's brother, Jeb Bush, are hanging in the balance. This no longer is a victory for Vice President Gore. We're moving it back into the too close to call.
One order of crow,
please. Yes.
Now could we just review this again about how?
Well, I think in the fullness of time tonight we're going to have an explanation for this, but we're reporting to you what's happening.
Well, what we're being told by our executive producer, Sid Bedingfield, is that based on the information we have from Florida, we don't entirely trust all the information that we have, and I assume the VNS service, and Bill, you can explain all this, is part of that decision.
That's right. The networks and the Associated Press collaborate in supporting a research service, really, Voter News and Surveys, which does the exit polling and also collects the data from sample precincts around the country. And they're the ones who provide us with the information that allow us to call the states. We are normally very cautious. We haven't retracted. We've simply said, at the moment, we're not sure of that call, so we're going to say we're not ready to confirm it at this point.
Clarify for us again, Bill, what goes into making a call?
The exit polls, which we look at voters coming out of the polling booth all over the country, sample precincts, where we look at precincts that have been pre-selected around the state to see how they're voting compared with how they voted in the past,
for example,
including
in the state
turnout.
of Florida, there would be several
sample precincts,
right?
Yes, number of precincts all over the state, and we take into account the absentee ballots, which are in many states counted very quickly.
Now
Do you like your crow well done?
Well, that's why I like to put on the table this fact. But to look ahead at the map, the electoral map, and votes, if you take 25 votes away from Al Gore and put it in the undecided column, and should they break for Bush, the entire calculation of the last hour and a half changes dramatically.
Yeah,
because at that point, one thing that it's tricky to remember, if you take 25 votes from one side and put it to the other, the actual shift is 50 electoral votes, and that's a big number. We're not saying that's going to happen, but this night just got even more complicated and tricky and fascinating than it has been up to now.
Candy Crowley joins us from Austin. Candy.
I think you can hear the crowd reaction to Florida being put back. Not too close to call. You also heard the governor saying, look, it's way too close to call. So that's what they've been feeling all along. Obviously, they have to be satisfied with this change back into the toss-up column.
Candy, explain again, if you will. I know you've been talking about this all today, but why is Florida such an important piece of their calculation, and Pennsylvania, for that matter, both of which the governor was challenging?
Well, first of all, Florida is one of those states that they've always said, the pundits have always said, very tough to put together an electoral map without Florida. There was also obviously the family connection. I have to tell you, though, that even now they say they can win without Florida, but they don't believe they're going to have to. Pennsylvania, obviously a major battleground state. They felt that they would get a boost with Tom Ridge. You saw the governor talking to Tom Ridge. They have been in there quite a bit. They still hold out hope for that state. We yet still are calling that for Vice President Gore, but this was one of those amazing nights. So they're obviously very energized in this crowd, and I can assure you in the Bush campaign.
Well, we knew it was going to be a little amazing. We just didn't know how amazing this night was going to be. Candy Crowley, hang on to your hat, because we don't know what's going to happen tonight. We've been saying it all night long, and we've just proven it. Could you pass the crow?
Well, listen, there's nothing more delightful, and I have to say this as a member of the press, than watching an election where you actually have to wait to see what the voters are going to do. And one of the things that has made this night so tricky is it has been 25 years since we've had an election where we had to go deep into the night and wait. In 1976, it was about 2:33 in the morning before Mississippi and Ohio gave that very close race to Jimmy Carter. And it may well be, and this is another thing that the night may prove, that many of these states are going to be decided by close margins, which is what makes the popular vote count as we get deeper into the night even more fascinating.
And one of the things adding to this is the muscle that organized labor is rolling out this night. John King, reporting from Nashville, Tennessee, said he was on the phone with the AFL-CIO's political director, who said that the union voters who had voted in Pennsylvania and other Midwestern locations.
Ernie, I'm interrupting you because it is 10 o'clock on the East Coast and polls have closed in 5 states, and we are able to call George W. Bush the winner in the state of Utah. He takes its 5 electoral votes. In the state of Idaho, another win for George W. Bush. Rack up 4 more electoral votes for the governor of the state of Texas. Nevada is one too close to call. Nevada's 4 electoral votes. We are not able to call that state one way or another. Montana, another check mark there for the governor of Texas, and it's 3 electoral votes. And the last state with polls to close at this hour, Iowa, the Hawkeye state, it's 7 electoral votes. We are not able to call it. So it just gets more exciting and more exciting. And here is the electoral map. We're going to be looking at this throughout the night. At this hour, with the polls closed in all but 5 states across the United States, we are able to give George W. Bush 197 electoral votes. His states are those in red. Vice President Al Gore, 167 electoral votes. His states in blue, and all those states in yellow, we don't have enough information yet to give them one way or another.
And let us commemorate the fact that this could be a night when the West will actually continue to vote before the election is over. They always complain in Oregon and California and Washington that the election is over and their polls are still open. Well, it looks like the election's not going to be over. And California, Oregon, and Washington are going to vote, and they could cast the decisive votes in this election.
That's the point Mike McCurry was making earlier.
In fact, this
could actually...
Yes. Roll right on through. I mean, maybe we will at midnight be waiting to see what Alaska does. It is true that if the West complaints in past years are right, then tonight there should be about a 95% turnout in Washington and Oregon and California. But do you remember, in one sense, the pre-election predictions have been true. That is, we have been saying for a long time, we may be here late at night waiting for Florida, Iowa, Wisconsin, and some of the western states to report. Well, it's 10 o'clock, which is late by some of our standards, and we're waiting for Iowa and Wisconsin and Florida and the West to report, and it is as close as you can imagine in terms of trying to put together this 270 vote total. One other point. In past years at this hour, we'd be talking about broad national trends sweeping across the country deciding the election. It seems to me that every time you come up with an exit poll, there's another trend or a trendette. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any one theme driving this election.
Guess what?
Well,
he has another
I have another
exit
one.
poll.
And I'm not sure it'll give you a theme, but it's an interesting one about Iowa. We haven't called Iowa yet. It was a Dukakis state. It was a Clinton state, not called. One of the reasons it's hard to call is look at the independent vote. They're about a third of the Iowa voters, and the independents there are split down the middle about evenly between Gore and Bush and 9% for other candidates. Independents around the country have generally broken in past elections pretty heavily for the Republican. Democrats rarely carry independent voters, but in Iowa today and in other states, we're seeing the independents splitting right down the middle, and they are the crucial swing votes, and they're the ones who are making this election so close.
Are we beginning to get much of a whiff of the Nader factor tonight?
Not yet. Not really yet. The Nader, because the states, Nader is not getting that many votes in most of the states we've already called. We're waiting to see Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the West Coast states. That's where you can make a difference. And let me add something. There was a movement among Nader voters to wait until late at night to vote. For a simple reason. They said they want to find out if Al Gore needs their votes. So some of them may be waiting up in Oregon and Washington and California and elsewhere to decide how to vote to see whether or not Al Gore needs their vote or whether they can safely vote for Al Gore.
Just one
More than a little
calculation.
We have called Minnesota for Gore, however.
We have called Minnesota.
Yeah, but and that was a state where we thought Nader might play big. But Wisconsin, Iowa, Washington, and Oregon to come, we still don't know.
Interesting, more than a little calculation on the part of some Nader voters. We learned in the last couple of weeks or so there have been websites set up for Nader voters in states where they were worried that their vote for Ralph Nader might hurt Al Gore, might tip the state to George W. Bush. They set up a swapping system where they would communicate with a voter in a state that was going to most definitely go either all for Gore or all for Bush. And they swapped so that they could the other voter would cast a vote for Ralph Nader.
My guess,
to help him get to that 5% to get the Green Party.
My guess is that if we had called the race already for one of the two presidential candidates, either Gore or Bush, the Nader vote in Oregon and Washington and California would swell.
Yeah.
But we haven't called it.
And CNN earlier today, Judy, had on in interviews some of these Nader voters and some of the people who swap votes. It was very interesting listening to the rationales, too.
We have a call to make in the state of New Hampshire. CNN declares that Texas Governor George W. Bush will take the 4 electoral votes. Every vote counts, folks. The 4 electoral votes in the state of New Hampshire go to the governor of Texas. So let's look at his total now. He is over the 200 mark at 201 electoral votes. Those are the states in red. Al Gore, 167, the states in blue, and an awful lot of states still in yellow that we are not able to call one way or another. But New Hampshire, a state that Al Gore and George W. Bush both wanted to win, both would have liked to have had.
He lost it in the winter. He won it in the fall.
And McCain had a lot to do with both of those eventualities. New Hampshire looks like a little red, lonely outpost up there in the solid blue Gore Northeast, and McCain had a great deal to do with that. It appears that he helped deliver
Here's
New Hampshire.
another, I'm going to interrupt. We've got another call to make. The state of Missouri, the Show Me State, goes for George W. Bush, 11 electoral votes in his corner. It's racking up. If it was 202, this makes it 213 for George W. Bush. It's getting interestinger and interestinger, as they said in Alice in Wonderland.
Well, psychologically, Governor Bush has to feel good cracking
212,
the 200
I
point.
misspoke.
And
these are pictures from Austin, Texas, of the Bush crowd reacting to the calls, both Missouri and New Hampshire falling in to the George W. Bush column.
this reminds me of Rocky. You know, or one of those boxing movies where in one round, one guy's down and there's a 9 count, he staggers to his feet and then he knocks the other guy down. What makes this interesting is that, well, it's been interesting since we started, but all of the notions of how to look at this campaign in which we said, look, we can't tell you what states it's going to come down to. It may come down to a handful of small states that really never seem to matter in the fight for the presidency. Look, Nevada is out. New Hampshire's electoral votes could make a key difference. Arizona is still out. I think Colorado is still out. New Mexico is still out. These are states that generally have very little to do with the outcome of a presidential campaign that are fought in the big battleground states. But the way this electoral map is adding up, one of those tiny states that's in play could wind up deciding the presidency.
Larry King is standing by in Washington. He has some guests. Larry?
We do, Bernie. We start with William Bennett, the co-director of Empower America. He was President Reagan's chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities and Secretary of Education, as well as the drug czar for President Bush. Your mood has changed since you arrived here tonight. What do you make of this night, Bill?
Well, last half hour has been good. I think the next half hour is Bush country, too. We'll see. I got a comment, though, Larry. You know, I'm not a conservative press basher. A lot of conservatives are. But this really shouldn't happen. You should not call a state and then have to take it back. You're not the only guys who did it. NBC did it. I think other people did, too. But there have been all these tributes to democracy and all these explanations that we may have to be here late this evening or into tomorrow. Well, let's stay late this evening or into tomorrow. You don't call a state like Florida, as big and critical as Florida, and then take it back off the board. This affects how people think. It takes the air out of people's enthusiasm. I mean, I'm glad the mistake is corrected, but Bill Schneider was saying we're going to be very cautious. Well, should have been very cautious and not called it in the first place. That's really an interference in democracy.
The same on the other side. Do you think if Bush is close on one, they should not call it?
They should obviously observe whatever structures and rules they've got. But of course, this isn't a point about liberal bias I'm making. This is a point about procedures and following it right and counting right, doing your math right or doing your homework. But I mean, this should not happen to either side. I don't know if it's the eagerness for ratings, but we've already been told that we might expect a long night into tomorrow.
And you were told correctly.
Democracy can survive that. We can do that. The American people are grown up enough. You don't have to tell us something that you're not really reasonably sure of.
What do you make of this swing through the night, one way back and forth?
Well, I mean, it's a very close contest. Obviously, the turnout's interesting. There's some pieces here I don't understand. I have heard that there was a large, absentee ballot participation in Florida and in other states. I think there was a big one in Texas when Governor Bush ran for governor. Your other guests can talk about that. I may be right. I may be wrong about that. But what's the turnout of the Christian right? We've heard a lot about labor and African Americans. That's surely in big numbers. Where's the religious right? I'm curious about that. Where are the Catholics? They were a big target. I'd like to know the answer to that. And the suburbs seem to be pretty interestingly split. Before we had this retraction of Florida, one had to comment. It's a loyal Republican one still had to comment. Hey, 3 Republican governors, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Florida. But now, obviously, that's in question, and Governor Ridge is calling Governor Bush, saying Pennsylvania's still in play. So it's a long night, and again, we can, if we can stay up for Johnny and David and other ridiculous things, we can sure stay up for democracy. Don't do this to us, guys.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for your thoughts. William Bennett, the co-director of Empower America. We understand there's another call coming in a moment. As soon as we get it, we'll go right to it. Ann Riches, you have deflated in the last half hour.
Well, actually, I just feel like I have begun my day because I've gotten lectured by Bill Bennett, which, you don't feel like you can go a day without it.
Was don't jump too
soon. Sure. And I know why. Because what the Republicans do is they make a concerted effort, and the Bush people did this in my race, and so I know they have done it in this race. I told everybody, watch out for it. They make a concerted effort to register absentee voting for military. And
still a vote, though.
Absolutely, nothing wrong with it. Just smart as it can be, because it's a sleeper vote. You never see it. They make a real effort to get them registered.
Hold on, Ann. Let's go to Judy Woodruff. We are calling another state. Judy?
Larry, we do have a state to call. The state of West Virginia. CNN Calls is in the corner for George W. Bush. The Texas governor takes West Virginia's 5 electoral votes. This is based not only on interviews with voters as they left the polling places, but also on our analysis of key sample precincts throughout the state. Now let's look again at the totals on the electoral map. 270 needed to win at this hour. It's 10:12 Eastern Time. We are giving George W. Bush 217 electoral votes. Those states in red, we're giving Al Gore 167. The states in blue, the ones we are not able to call yet, are the states in yellow. So the map is ever changing. Larry, back to you.
West Virginia, a state that should never be lost by the Democrats. Yeah. What do you make of it?
I thought we would lose West Virginia.
So what do you need to do now to win this?
So what we have to do now to win it, and I think the one that's hurt us the worst for my news is New Hampshire. We have to win Washington now. We have to win Oregon now. We've got Minnesota, win California, Hawaii. And then we have to pick up another small state like
Florida
Arizona, New Mexico.
Florida back?
Of course we have to have Florida
We
back.
understand Donna Brazil, who is the wheel behind the cog of the Gore campaign, is with us now. Donna, are you there?
Yes, sir. Good evening. How are you?
What do you make of
also
these?
say good evening to Governor Riches as well.
Hey, Donna, good job, girl.
What do you make of these
Thank you, ma'am.
shifting tides, Donna?
Well, you know, the tide is turning, and I still believe that this election night is still young. There are many states that are still out there voting. We have people who are standing in lines in St. Louis and Colorado and other places. And, you know, there are many small states that are still out there, some more absentee ballots. Governor Riches talked about the military. Well, you know, there are seniors. There are a lot of union households that voted absentee, African Americans. I believe we had a great turnout today. So this election night is still young. So,
but a half hour ago, frankly,
got a couple more hours, sir.
Weren't you feeling much better a half hour ago before they took Florida from the win column to the maybe column, and then suddenly losing New Hampshire and West Virginia?
Well, I still feel that I still believe that Florida is in the Gore column. You know, we started off the day in Florida. The Vice President was there last night. Senator Lieberman joined us in Tampa. We had a tremendous turnout in Florida, all across the state. So I don't believe Florida should be taken out of the Democratic column. I think it's premature, and we'll see what happens over the next couple of hours in the state of Florida. But remember, we still have a number of states that are voting. The polls are still open in a couple of states, and we're going to take many of those last remaining states tonight.
Has Ralph Nader, and he's due to be with us in this hour, has he hurt you tonight?
I haven't heard a lot about Ralph Nader today. I've talked to radio stations across the country, to our campaign workers, and we didn't see a lot of force out there. It was a lot of hype, but not a lot of votes. So I believe that Vice President Al Gore has done a great job tonight. We're bringing home a lot of Republicans and Democrats and independents alike voting for Al Gore, and as well as Green voters.
So are you, Donna, predicting that you will pull this out?
I'm still predicting a victory tonight. It'll be a surprise to some of you who are, you know, calling it the shots right now, but I still believe the American people are speaking, they're voting with their feet, and they're standing in line waiting to cast their ballot, to have their voice heard, and Al Gore will still be the winner tonight.
Thank you, Donna. And Ann Riches will be back with us at midnight when we're joined once again by the rest of our panel, Senator Baker and Bob Woodward. We also expect to hear from Ralph Nader in this hour. I'm Larry King. Now back to Election Central down in Atlanta, and here's Judy.
All right, Larry, thanks a lot. And it is a heart-stopping night of an election. We are going to take a break now, but when we come back, we do expect, as Larry said, to hear from Ralph Nader shortly. We also will talk to Tom Daschle, who's a Democratic leader in the United States Senate. Much, much more. Stay with us.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by America's Pharmaceutical Companies and Ditech.com. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. America's Pharmaceutical Companies and Ditech.com. Home loan savings direct from the lender.
Does everybody know what this is? A heart. 50 million Americans suffer from high blood pressure. There are no symptoms, yet high blood pressure is the primary cause of heart disease. There are still millions who are unable to lower their blood pressure with medication. That's why we're developing this new medicine, and it has excellent effectiveness in treating blood pressure. Maybe by the time these kids are my age, we'll have found a way to prevent high blood pressure in everyone.
The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us.
The internet goes everywhere because of us. The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
How many
experts does it take to predict a market change?
Tickets, folks. I'm out.
Tax laws have changed. Should I be looking at my estate plan again?
Anyone who knows me wouldn't recommend a stock like this.
Oh, not again. This guy.
Investment strategies for you. Great. Just for me and 5 million other people.
Thank you, PaineWebber.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing costs to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
I will no longer be a silent witness to my own kids' education.
I will no longer sit and watch the system fail my kids.
I will no longer let them use my tax dollars.
My tax dollars to tell me where to send my kids to school.
I will no longer let them put the system's
needs above my kids' needs.
I will no longer let freedom and choice be the American way in everything.
Except their education.
I want to have choices.
I want to have a voice.
I want to decide where to send my kids to school.
19 minutes after 10 o'clock Eastern Time, there are still 5 states where the people are voting, plus the area around St. Louis where we're told a judge ordered that the polls remain open after many people complained that there were more people who wanted to vote and didn't have time to do so. We've been looking at the electoral vote. Let's look now at the raw vote total. These are real counted numbers. Well, we will look at the electoral vote first. I take that back, my mistake. Out of the 207 needed to win, George Bush is 217 electoral votes of the way there. They are the red states on this map that we have put together to this point. Al Gore, 167 electoral votes. His states are the ones in blue. The yellow states are the ones we are not able to call yet. With 37% of the precincts in the country reporting, this is the raw vote. George W. Bush with 50% of the popular vote, 20 million votes, 20.4 million, and Al Gore with 48%, 19.6 million. We were told going into today that maybe about 100 million Americans would be voting. We'll see whether that's correct. We never know those turnout numbers until every vote is counted. Joining us from, I believe, is it Washington, Tom Daschle? From Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, a familiar face. Tom Daschle, of course, the Democratic leader of the United States Senate. Senator Daschle, I'm going to ask you about the Senate in a minute, but first of all, your reaction on what's happening in the presidential race so far.
Well, Judy, we knew that it was going to be close from the very beginning, and as you said, there are still 5 states that are still counting votes and still allowing people to vote, so this is far from over. We're going to watch how those states come in. We know that these other states are going to be very close, and we're still optimistic. We still are very hopeful that this thing could be ours before the night is out, and I think that there's a real possibility of that.
What are you, at this point, what is, in your estimation, what does Al Gore have to rack up some more numbers on that map that we've been showing to put him over 270?
Well, obviously, we have to take those states that have not yet been won. We know we've got a real good chance in Florida. We know we've got a real good chance in some of the western states that have not yet been counted. We think we've got a good chance in Missouri, where the vote is very heavy all day long.
If you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt because we do have a call to make. CNN says that the state of New Mexico goes into the corner of Al Gore. Vice President Gore picks up the 5 electoral votes in the state of New Mexico. That is and that adds another handful to the total we've given Al Gore. That blue state that's popped up there on just to the left of Texas is New Mexico, of course, and we've now given it to Al Gore. So the total for George W. Bush, 217, for Al Gore, 172. Senator Daschle, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that puts him a little bit closer.
Exactly, and that makes my point. There are all these states that are still out there that are very close, and I think that you're going to see more of those blue states coming in tonight.
What about in the institution that you are most closely connected with, the United States Senate? At this point, we have Democrats with a pickup of 1. Where do you think this night is going to end up? What are you hearing from all your sources?
Well, we're very encouraged, and as I said, there's still a lot of states that are still voting, and we don't want to discourage anybody from making sure that they participate tonight. But I do believe that we're going to be picking up additional seats as we go through. We have a real good chance, as you know, in Missouri. We've got an excellent chance in Michigan. We know we've already won in Minnesota. I still think there's a possibility, of course, in Montana and Washington. So we've got a lot to look forward to tonight, and these states look very good for us right now.
All right, Senator Tom Daschle, the Minority Leader of the United States Senate, we thank you very much for being with us, and we hope we can talk to you again very soon. And right now we want to go, thanks very much, Senator. Right now we want to go back to Washington to Larry King.
Thank you, Judy. And joining us now is Ralph Nader, the candidate of the Green Party. He is still expectantly awaiting the results in Washington and Oregon, where he's supposed to run strong. Are you disappointed tonight, Ralph? Ralph, do you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. They just quieted down here. They're so boisterous. Yes.
Are you disappointed?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you disappointed?
Oh, no. We're coming out of this election with millions of votes, with the third largest political party in America, replacing the Reform Party, the fastest growing party. In the year 2002, there are going to be thousands of candidates on the Green Line, local, state, and national. And right away, this week, we become a watchdog party, a viable watchdog party on the two parties, telling them they're going to have to shape up, or they're going to shrink down and lose votes in the future. And I think the progressive wing of the Democratic Party understands that they're going to be more influential in trying to wrest control from their party away from the right-wing Democratic Leadership Council.
Are you disappointed, though, in only 2% of the vote, thus far around 2% nationally, and you were expecting, I think, 4 to 5?
I'm expecting a new party with millions of voters. We're 9% in Minnesota. In New England states, we're 6-7%. Colorado, 7%. It's too early to tell. We've got a lot of young voters that tend to vote late, and we've got polls still open in the West Coast and Hawaii and Alaska, and they're coming in. I mean, they got a terrific get-out-the-vote out there. Whatever it is, Larry, you know me. I like to be the underdog. We're going to build this party in a big way, and we're going to challenge the two parties. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning, the takeoff stage to the next leap forward.
And are you going to be candidate again, by the way?
Well, one election at a time.
All right. Do you think you're going to cost Al Gore the election tonight? Honestly.
No. I think Al Gore only can beat Al Gore, as Dave Letterman said. I think it's important to note that whether Al Gore or George W. Bush gets in the White House, they're no longer the decision makers on most issues, Larry. You and I and the media know it's the permanent corporate government that they write about, the swarming 22,000 corporate lobbyists in this city, the political action committees, the extravagant fundraisers with big business funds, both parties. That's what we're going for. That's what we're going for, to reestablish the sovereignty of the people against the present sovereignty of global corporations.
Obviously, the crowd is watching you here. Would you tell us what, if anything, has surprised you tonight?
What has surprised me?
Yeah, look at the two other candidates. What in the election thus far has surprised you?
Well, Bush is having a problem in Florida. I mean, this is really amazing. I think the two mistakes Bush made were on Social Security and on this tax cuts that benefit the wealthy. But, you know, don't worry. The Democrats are very good, Larry, at electing very bad Republicans. They're going to lose the Congress to the Republicans probably. Once again, the extreme wing of the Republican Party. You can't rely on the Democratic Party anymore to defend us. They sent Scalia and Thomas to the U.S. Supreme Court as well.
Wouldn't you rather have a moderate Democrat than an extreme Republican?
I'd rather have a person in the White House who doesn't take in the marching orders from the corporate paymasters, and both of them don't qualify. They both flunk, and we're now bringing in so many good people. You're going to see them surface in 2002, 2004. You know, we're in it for the long run, Larry. Been around for 37 years, and we're going to connect the civic groups and the political groups so that there's a real authenticity there that's really grounded.
Why do you think Gore, as reported by CNN, has lost West Virginia tonight?
First, I don't think he campaigned enough in West Virginia. Second, West Virginia has not participated in the economic boom, so to speak. They've been left behind. And he didn't take a strong stand against the coal industry to stop blowing those mountaintops off and rubble in the streams and shaking up all those hollows, all those communities who don't want that to happen. I think he misread that. I think he went with King Coal instead of the people of West Virginia, who want a responsive coal industry that addresses their needs.
And what do your people tell you you're going to get in, say, Washington and Oregon?
We'll be getting probably 7, 8, 9%. You can't believe the enthusiasm in Eugene, Oregon. We may carry that. In Portland, Oregon, we had the greatest political rallies of the presidential campaign, filled Madison Square Garden and the Boston Garden and Seattle and Minneapolis and the MCI Center. And we had a great agenda. The problem is, you know, you're climbing up against these two parties. They exclude you from the debate. They command most of the media. They command far more of the money. Our whole budget is equal to what the Democratic Party pumped into political ads just in one state, Michigan. But we know what we're up against, and we're going to scale these two-party duopolies on the installment plan in election after election. And anybody who wants more detail about what really we intend to do and how we stand for the people of this country, in reality, not just in rhetoric, our website is votenader.com.
Thank you, Ralph. Always good seeing you.
Thank you, Larry.
Ralph Nader with the crowd watching on the big screen. A loser tonight, but he says a winner. We'll be back at midnight with our outstanding panel and lots of thoughts and opinions, and it may not be over at midnight. Back to central headquarters in Atlanta and Judy.
All right, Larry, thanks a lot. Fascinating talking with Ralph Nader. Jeff Greenfield, did you want to make a point before
Very quickly, Nader's other goal tonight, if he gets 5% of the popular vote, he's eligible for millions of dollars in federal campaign funds for the next campaign. Right now, it doesn't look like he's going to make it, and that was a key goal.
But he says the votes are still being counted.
And
so
God knows we've learned that tonight.
Boy, we sure have. All right, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have much to look forward to, including Karl Rove, the campaign manager, chief strategist, I should say, for Texas Governor George W. Bush. He's in Austin. We'll be right back.
Tomorrow on a special edition of CNN Newsstand, Jeff Greenfield wraps up Election 2000 with a unique look at who won the undecided vote. 10 Eastern on CNN.
Hit the trail with the Westerns Channel.
Come and get it, boys!
You'll find the biggest stars, the fastest shootouts, and the wildest antics from the only channel dedicated to 100% Westerns. Wild Bill. Commercial free all day, every day. The Western Channel. Saddle up with the legends.
Bradford's, just the best.
Ann Richards, Howard Baker, and more on a special midnight edition of Larry King Live, tonight on CNN.
I've been a pharmaceutical company researcher for a little over 5 years. And my area specialty is women's health. I love talking to women's groups about women's health because I think it's important to be in control of your life. At my pharmaceutical company, we're looking at all ages of a woman. You know, we're not just looking at postmenopausal women or premenopausal women or childbearing. We're looking at all ages of a woman's life. My hope is that we'll continue to broaden our research, move forward into new areas, and that we'll also work on developing better medicines for the diseases we've already started on: osteoporosis, Alzheimer's disease, and breast cancer. I really love what I do. My hope for the future is that we develop new medicines for women so that they will have more choices that let them enjoy healthier, active lives.
Updating you now on the battle for the White House, the battle between Vice President Al Gore and Texas Governor George Bush. Looking at the electoral map right now, the governor is leading the vice president 217 electoral votes to 172. These are the uncalled states, the undecided states. Arizona, Arkansas, you see what kind of electoral power they have on the right column. Colorado with 8, Florida 25. That has been moved back into the too close to call column by CNN. The Hawkeye State 7, Nevada 4, Wisconsin 11. This is the raw vote nationwide with 41% of all precincts reporting. Governor Bush with 22.6 million to Vice President Gore's 21.9 million. Perhaps fewer people are watching these figures more intensely than Governor Bush's chief strategist, Karl Rove, was in Austin, Texas. How do you cobble together the magic 270 electoral votes you need?
Well, first, you named a number of states which are going to fall into the Bush column and which are already falling on other networks. Wisconsin, Arkansas, Iowa, Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, Alaska, Colorado. These are all states that we feel comfortable with, and there are 98 votes there. If you include Florida, and Florida, let me tell you, Bernie, you all called Florida before Florida even closed its polls. Florida is a state which votes in 2 time zones. The Republican Panhandle of Florida is in the central time zone, and you all called Florida before the polls had even closed in Panama City and Fort Walton Beach and Pensacola, and we feel good about Florida. We have a fabulous organization there. Let me just give you a few examples. In Congressional District 1, our goal was, which is the westernmost part of the Panhandle, our goal was to come out of there with about an 80,000 vote margin. We'll come out of there with a 100,000 vote margin. In the Jacksonville area, some of the Jacksonville counties, St. John's, our goal was to come out of there with a 12,000 vote margin. We'll come out with a 20,000 vote margin. In Clay County, our object were 7,000 votes ahead of our vote goal. In Pasco County, 7,000 votes ahead of our vote goal. There's only one county in the state that we found where we are running behind our vote goal. We're running behind our vote goal by 16,000 in one county, but we're making up for it all across the state. That's why Governor Bush is leading in the popular vote, and while he will win Florida in its 25 electoral votes and the White House tonight.
Which county is that, where you're trailing by 16,000?
Yeah, Orange County, we'd hoped to win it by 10. We lost it by 6. But Pinellas County, which we'd expected to lose, we're running ahead in Pinellas County by 22,000 votes ahead of our vote goal. And in Democrat parts of the state, like Dade County, Miami, we'd anticipated losing the county by up to 50,000 votes. With 12% of the vote in, we're actually up 8,000 votes in the county. In Broward, where we anticipated losing up by 150,000 votes and still winning statewide, with about just over a quarter of the vote in, we're only 35,000 down. And in Palm Beach, with nearly half the vote in, we'd anticipated running 80,000 votes down in that county. We're only 30,000 down. So we're running stronger in the Republican areas than we need to, and we're running much stronger than we need to in the Democrat areas, and we're very comfortable with where we are in Florida.
2 points. We had some difficulty with the VNS data we received. The other point is that our criterion for calling races is we do so when 75% of the precincts in a state have closed. Question.
Well, I do think that that's one criteria you might want to think about changing, because again, you called the state before the polls had closed in a considerable part of the state, and the results are becoming clear tonight. That part of the state is the Panhandle is voting overwhelmingly for Governor Bush, and it maybe has something to do with why the numbers that were used in the earlier projection were wrong.
Carl, and it's Jeff Greenfield. So just to be fair, are there other states that have been called for Al Gore that you would now say to us, watch it, you may be wrong about those too?
Well, I think one of them may be New Mexico, but we'll watch and see. I just think this whole issue of calling states on the basis of exit polling is something that needs to be taken another serious look at, just like the whole issue of running all these polls in the midst of the campaign. But back to the main issue at hand, Governor Bush with 217 electoral votes has an easier path to 270 tonight than does Al Gore. We have a bunch of states in the West that Governor Bush is expected to win and will win, and what's left out in the Midwest, we feel very comfortable we're going to take Wisconsin and Iowa for certain, and Arkansas as well.
And notwithstanding the fact that you have California, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington still to be called.
Well, we're going to take a couple. We're going to take a couple of those states. All we need under your calculation is 58 electoral votes. Florida provides half of them with 25. And then we get into Wisconsin with 11, Iowa with 7, Arkansas with 6, Nevada with 4, Oregon with 7, Arizona with 8, Colorado with 8, Alaska with 3, and we're more than enough there.
Well, we've put Florida back into the too close to call category. You're saying you're going to take Florida?
Well, you asked me how we were going to be able to do it, and yes, we're going to take Florida.
Karl Rove, thanks very much. Did you have a question,
sir.
Bill Schneider?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, do you believe you're going to take Oregon now? Do you have
I believe we will. I mean, Oregon has been a logistical effort because they, as you know, Dr. Schneider, they vote by mail. Okay. There are only 240 locations in the state where you could drop off your ballots today. You had to mail them in. And we had a massive effort to phone and mail and encourage people to get their ballots in, and we were very comfortable with where we think we are in Oregon. I also feel good about Washington State. I know Alaska is going to vote late, but it's going to vote strongly for George W. Bush. And I don't be too premature about California. As you know, Governor Duke Machen went into his first election down in California and won because of the absentee ballots. Pete Wilson did the same, and we've got a grassroots effort like nobody's seen in California in a long, long time. We're coming hard for California, and who knows, we may just surprise you on the other coast, just as we surprised you in Florida.
Karl Rove, thanks for joining us. Judy.
If I heard him correctly, he said he thinks they're going to win Wisconsin. All of these states now, I believe we have not called. Wisconsin, Arkansas, Oregon, we just heard him say Arizona, Colorado. He's optimistic about Florida, and he said, don't be too premature about the state of California. So this is somebody who's been watching these numbers day in and day out, and an hour in and hour out. One little explanation we want to go to now, one of the states where we've been able to call 3/4 of the electoral votes is the state of Maine. The way it works in Maine, only one other state works this way, and that's Nebraska. The electoral votes are awarded not winner take all by the whole state, but awarded by congressional district. So the person who gets the most votes in the state gets two for the state, right, plus gets the one that they have a majority in.
Right, and that's right. And so what we don't know yet is the other congressional district is in the balance. And the way this election is going, Judy, that one electoral vote can loom very large. Very important. And some of these states that we're talking about here, some of the ones that we just, Arkansas, 6, Oregon, is a little bit more. It's 7, but just a few.
We should mention something to explain what Karl said. Oregon is the only state that had no polling places today. The Oregon election was conducted entirely by mail. Now, what Karl Rove just told us was that they had a very concerted, organized effort in Oregon to get the vote out from the Bush supporters, and that's why they believe they're going to win that state. I think maybe with a little help from Ralph Nader's voters, but they had a way of organizing those votes to get the mail balloting in for George W. Bush. It's a very unusual state. There were no polling places.
We're going to know about
there won't be any exit polls either, because there were no polls.
We will know pretty soon, because when the polls, when the deadline happens, I think those votes are opened and counted relatively quickly. They're counted by computer. But here we are.
And they do it faster in Oregon than they do in Washington.
Yes. Gentlemen, we need to get over to the Balance of Power desk to hear some about those very important non-presidential races. Wolf.
Judy, let's take a look, first of all, what's happening in the U.S. Senate. As you know, the Republicans had a 54-46 majority. Right now, this is what it looks like. 35 Republican holdovers, 31 Democratic holdovers, 14 Republican wins tonight, 13 Democratic wins tonight. Right now, the new total, let's take a look at what we can project. It will be 49 Republicans in the U.S. Senate as of right now, 44 Democrats, 7 of those Senate seats still undecided. We can call Orrin Hatch, the Republican from Utah, the winner, the former presidential candidate for the Republican nomination. He won. There's a very close race going on right now in Missouri. Senator John Ashcroft, the incumbent, facing Mel Carnahan, the governor who passed away in a plane crash only a couple of weeks ago. Very close race. There was a controversy a little while ago, earlier this evening. A lower court judge in Missouri kept the polls open for a while. They were subsequently closed by a state appeals judge. But the incumbent Republican, Kit Bond, speaking out in Missouri earlier, lamented that decision to keep the polls open a bit longer. Listen to this.
So the Democratic Party in the city of St. Louis wants to perpetrate the biggest fraud on the voters of this state and on this nation that we've ever seen. I believe that criminal vote fraud should be prosecuted by the federal government.
Senator Kit Bond speaking out earlier on that decision to keep the polls open for a while in Missouri. Let's take a look at what the pickups are in the U.S. Senate as of right now. In Florida, Bill Nelson, the Democrat, has won. In Delaware, Tom Carper, the governor, has won the Senate seat. In Minnesota, Mark Dayton, the Democrat, has won. That is a pickup as well. There are two Republican pickups in the U.S. Senate. George Allen, the winner in Virginia, and John Ensign, here we go, the winner in Nevada, beating Ed Bernstein, a criminal defense attorney. That's the open seat. Richard Bryan left vacant. Stuart Rothenberg, what do you make of this battle going on in the Senate right now?
Well, Wolf, everything is actually going as expected so far. There are actually 5 competitive seats outstanding, 4 of them currently held by Republicans: Missouri, Michigan, Montana, and Washington. One of them held by a Democrat, actually a retiring Democrat in Nebraska. If the Democrats are going to take control of the U.S. Senate, they're going to need to sweep all these races. That's going to be difficult.
There is a fierce battle going on in the House of Representatives as well. We do have a second pickup that we can report right now. The state senator Melissa Hart defeating State Representative Terry Van Horn, the Democrat. That's the seat that Ron Klink gave up, the Democrat, in order to run unsuccessfully for the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. Let's take a look at the balance of power in the House with more than 50% now, half of the House races determined. We only have 2 pickups right now, 1 Democratic pickup, 1 Republican pickup. This is as expected as well, right, Stuart?
Absolutely, Wolf. There are a number of Republican vulnerable seats that are now off the table. Rick Keller has won in that Orlando district. 2 Republican incumbents in North Carolina, Charles Taylor and Robin Hayes, held on. But so many close seats. In New Jersey, Mike Ferguson leads Marianne Connolly by 1,900 votes with 45% in. Pat Casey, a Democrat, a narrow lead over Don Sherwood in the Scranton Congressional District. Dick Zimmer, former congressman, has a narrow lead now, just pulled ahead in a narrow lead against Rush Holt in a New Jersey district. I could go on, but we don't have enough time, but there are a lot of very close races.
And we also are following the governor races. We can report right now in the state of Utah, Mike Leavitt defeating Bill Orton. Not a huge surprise. Mike Leavitt, the Republican in Utah. The races for the governorships are not all that surprising either, are they, Stuart?
No, I think actually they're less exciting than the congressional races where you're really talking about control of a branch of the federal government. But to the people in those individual states, they're pretty important.
And so just to button this up, the prospects of the Democrats regaining the majority in the House and in the Senate right now as we speak at 10:45 or so Eastern time?
Well, it's still uncertain. There are just too many races out. But the Democrats need to make some gains over the next hour or two, because when they get to the West Coast, that's their best opportunities. But they're going to probably need to be in plus territory by the time we get to Utah, Washington, and California, where they should make some real gains.
And in California, they are expecting some pickups, Democrats in California.
Right. They have a chance to pick up 3 or 4 seats, 1 in Washington, 1 in Utah. So the way these early races are playing out is not disastrous for them, but they're not quite getting the breaks they had hoped to get.
All right, Stuart Rothenberg, I want to go back to Bernie on the national desk. Bernie?
Thank you, Wolf. We continue covering this election night. The United States still does not have a new president. Our live coverage from CNN headquarters in Atlanta will continue in a moment.
Coverage of Election 2000 is brought to you by Chrysler and PaineWebber. For expanded coverage, log on to CNN.com. Chrysler, we're reinventing the passion for driving. And PaineWebber, thank you, PaineWebber.
Looking to save more and spend less this holiday season? With the Chrysler Holiday Sale, you can do just that. Because now you can save over $2,300 when you buy a new 2001 Town & Country LX with 4.9% financing. Or choose up to $3,000 cash allowance when you buy a new 2000 Chrysler minivan. So take advantage of the Chrysler Holiday Sale today for savings that let you spend more on a real holiday priority, yourself.
How many experts does it take to predict a market change?
Tickets, folks. I'm out.
Tax laws have changed. Should I be looking at my estate plan again?
Anyone who knows me wouldn't recommend a stock like this.
Oh, not again. This guy. Investment strategies for you. Great. Just for me and 5 million other people.
Thank you, PaineWebber.
Got yourself into too much credit card debt? Why not point and click your way out of debt with a second mortgage from Ditech.com? Whether you have equity or no equity, good credit or not so good credit, Ditech has a second mortgage with absolutely no closing cost to help you lower your monthly payments now. So point and click your way out of high-interest, non-tax deductible credit card debt at Ditech.com or call us at 1-800-71-FIX.
The internet goes everywhere because of us.
The internet is more reliable because of us.
The internet is growing because of us.
The internet is more exciting because of us. The internet is faster because of us.
The internet is better because of us.
Delivering the most content from the world's biggest network, Akamai.
As we're just 10 minutes away from the polls closing in those 4 states you just saw, we want to show you the popular vote in 3 very important states we cannot call yet. In the state of Florida, with 65% of the precincts reporting George W. Bush carrying 52% of the popular vote to 46% for Al Gore. In the state of Wisconsin, with 33% of the precincts reporting George W. Bush 49% to Al Gore's 47%. And in the state of Iowa, yet another state where we are not able to call the result, with 39% of the precincts reporting, look how close it is. 50% for Vice President Gore, 47% for George W. Bush. These are some very, very close races. You can see with these vote totals why we have not called these 3 states. Hal Bruno, give us a closer look at what's going on inside these states and why the vote is not certain yet one way or another.
Well, let's talk about Florida, Judy. Florida is, Al Gore got what he needed to get out of the Gold Coast area, and George Bush got what he had to get out of the Gulf Coast. But what happened here is George Bush is getting a heavy vote out of Central and North Florida, also out here in the Panhandle. The thing that's making it so close, though, is the Tampa Bay area. That's the toss-up swing area, and both of them are doing well there.
All right. I mean, it's remarkable. You can actually see when you draw those circles around the parts of the state how you get a much better idea of the kinds of things that we just heard Karl Rove with the Bush campaign talking about.
Yeah, he made a very good point there when he said that, you know, the Panhandle out there in the West is on a different time zone. That's on Central Time, not on Eastern Time. And a lot of votes still had to come in from there. Now, it's not a heavily populated area. Where Bush is really getting his strength is from the Central Florida region. And that's the transplanted Midwesterners.
All right. Hal Bruno, Bernard Shaw.
We're going to check in now in New York State. Earlier, we declared Hillary Rodham Clinton the winner in New York Senate race. Let's check in there at Lazio headquarters, listen to what's going on. Deborah Fayerick is there also. Deborah, what's the latest?
Hi there. Sorry, Bernie. As you can see, a big roar went up in this crowd. You would think that Lazio won. New York is playing. There are happy, smiling faces. There's a general enthusiasm here. Even Rick Lazio and his wife, unflappable,
we can hear you. We don't know how much of a voice you're going to have in about 2 hours, but Deborah Fayrick in New York at Congressman Rick Lazio's headquarters. Earlier, CNN declared Hillary Rodham Clinton will become a senator from New York. Still to come on CNN's election night coverage, the Capitol gang. But at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, polls will be closing in California with 54 electoral votes, Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington. That and much, much more. Please stay with us.
Closed captioning brought to you by Uniglobe Travel. We stay in touch with your traveling needs to make your business trip or vacation a success. Uniglobe Travel, always in touch.
Tonight on Larry King Live Election Day 2000, join me, a special midnight show with Ann Richards, Howard Baker, and others. Tonight on CNN.
The Mystery Channel explores the dark side.
This is crazy.
Uncovers the truth and keeps you in suspense.
Why are you following me?
It's the only channel dedicated to 100% mystery.
Hello?
Commercial free, all day, every day.
Oh, you were expecting.
The Mystery Channel, where suspense rules.
Steaks, seafood, sushi, and a dining experience you'll come back for again and again. Shogun, seafood, steaks, and sushi in Cool Springs.
Can't find the right car for you? Shop VHIX.com. Want access to 500,000 used cars? VHIX.com. Lease or purchase? VHIX.com. Or do side-by-side comparisons? VHIX.com. Need to find the right local dealer? VHIX.com. Find the right car for you. VHIX.com. Roadmap to the automotive world.
Looking for a safe, low-stress way to invest your money? Now you can learn George Fontenelle's insider secrets of high-profit, low-risk trading strategies at an upcoming workshop. Learn how to create explosive profits regardless of market direction, how to hedge risk and protect your profit in volatile markets, and we will reveal high-profit, low-risk trades that take only minutes a day to find. Register now and receive George's Insider Secrets video absolutely free. Visit our website or call our toll-free number on your screen now.
An election wrap-up on a special Inside Politics tomorrow, 5 Eastern on CNN.
Location. Live pictures from New York City, where Hillary Rodham Clinton celebrating with a few hundred of her closest friends. Up there, a very happy First Lady this night. We don't see the president on the stage with her, but we do see the retiring Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, whose seat she has evidently, yes, there is the president, whose seat she's been elected to, at least by our call. Their daughter, Chelsea.
Chuck Schumer. Senator Chuck Schumer with her, who she helped a lot 2 years ago, and he helped her this time out. He will now be the lesser-known senator, I think it's fair to say, from the state of New York.
And we know that not very far away from this place, Congressman Rick Lazio is speaking to his supporters. We haven't been able to hear what he is saying, but we do know that he is addressing a crowd at his headquarters elsewhere in New York City. This has to be a sweet, sweet night for Hillary Rodham Clinton.
And we should say that Daniel Patrick Moynihan, retiring after 24 years in the Senate, helped ease Mrs. Clinton's path to New York by introducing her when she came up to New York on her exploratory tour. There's Senator Schumer, who beat Al D'Amato 2 years ago.
And he predicted many, many months ago that Hillary Rodham Clinton would win.
This is a great night. And I know.
We're going to move over now to the headquarters, or rather the hotel headquarters of Rick Lazio. Listen to what the congressman is saying.
I want to thank the campaign manager who worked so hard. He almost ended up in a hospital. Bill Dalco worked his heart out for this thing. I want to thank two great leaders in our state. The first man who got into this race and worked hard throughout the campaign over these last few days, has knocked himself out. He's been a terrific friend to me. He's been an outstanding public servant and maybe the greatest governor our state has ever known, George Pataki. Thank you, George Pataki. And Libby as well. I'd like to thank also another great public servant, somebody who went to bat for me, worked very hard, up until the last possible event right before the polls closed, and that's our great mayor, again, one of the greatest mayors, Rudy Giuliani. Thank you. I want to thank a man who stood up for me last year, a man who stood on principle, a guy who has, I love you too, who's a dear, dear friend of mine, who has impeccable integrity, whose word you can count on, and there's not a whole lot of folks in public service you can say that about, unfortunately, and that's our great conservative chairman, Mike Long. Thank you, Mike. And I want to thank our Republican Chairman, Bill Powers, for working so hard. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Congressman Tom Reynolds, who chaired my committee, who is, I know, back up in Buffalo, worked incredibly hard. My great friend, Rob Portman, who many of you saw on the campaign trail. Congressman Amo Houghton. My brother-in-law, Mike Moriarty, for his hard work. Thank you. And finally, the person who was my strongest supporter, my friend, the person who probably should have been the candidate for Senate this time around.
Rick Lazio conceding in New York to Hillary Rodham Clinton. It is 11 o'clock on the East Coast in the United States, and CNN is prepared to make the following calls with the polls closing. Most of them. Al Gore has won California's big prize, 54 electoral votes. Farther west in Hawaii, 4 electoral votes going to the vice president. The situation in Oregon, it is too close to call. We cannot call that race yet, nor can we call the one in Washington State, with its 11 electoral votes. Looking to the moment at our electoral map, the vice president, by winning California, goes up over Governor Bush. Mr. Gore, 230 electoral votes. Mr. Bush, 217 electoral votes.
California, that is a state in which George Bush made a run and spent millions of dollars late in the campaign. It raised a few eyebrows. Some thought it was because they had a chance to carry it. Others said it was payback because the California Republicans were among the first group that went 2 years ago to Austin and asked Governor Bush to run and asked him to pledge that if he did run, he would not desert California the way his father and Senator Dole did. Now, in Oregon and Washington, there are 2 states where the nadir factor may or may not come into effect. And once again, we take 2 second-tier states, put them in the undecided column. With everything but Alaska reporting, you can see that the fate of the White House is in the hands of about 8 or 9 states that we cannot yet call.
All right, we are going to move all the way from the west coast of the United States all the way over to the east coast of the United States, where this woman has made history tonight by being elected to the United States Senate, a first lady. Let's listen to Hillary Rodham Clinton.
I mean, wow, this is amazing. Thank you all. Thank you. You know, we started this great effort on a sunny July morning in Pinder's Corner on Pat and Liz Moynihan's beautiful farm. And 62 counties, 16 months, 3 debates, 2 opponents,
and 6 black pantsuits later, because of you, here we are. You came out and said that issues and ideals matter. Jobs matter, downstate and upstate. Health care matters, education matters, the environment matters, Social Security matters, a woman's right to choose matters. It all matters, and I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you, New York. Thank you for opening up your minds and your hearts, for seeing the possibility of what we could do together for our children and for our future here in this state and in our nation. I am profoundly grateful to all of you for giving me the chance to serve you. I will do everything I can to be worthy of your faith and trust and to honor the powerful example of Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. I would like all of you and the countless New Yorkers and Americans watching to join me in honoring him for his incredible half-century of service to New York and our nation. Senator Moynihan, on behalf of New York and America, thank you. And I thank Chuck Schumer for his generous support and friendship. He has been and will be a great champion for the people of New York, and I very much look forward to fighting by his side in the United States Senate. I want to thank both of my opponents, Mayor Giuliani and Congressman Lazio. Congressman Lazio and I just spoke. I congratulate him on a hard-fought race, and I thank him for his service to the people of New York and Long Island, and I wish him, Pat, and their 2 beautiful daughters well. I promise you tonight that I will reach across party lines to bring progress for all of New York's families. Today, we voted as Democrats and Republicans. Tomorrow, we begin again as New Yorkers. And how fortunate we are indeed to live in the most diverse, dynamic, and beautiful state in the entire Union. You know, from the South Bronx to the Southern Tier, from Brooklyn to Buffalo, from Montauk to Messina, from the world's tallest skyscrapers to breathtaking mountain ranges, I've met people whose faces and stories I will never forget. Thousands of New Yorkers from all 62 counties welcomed me into your schools, your local diners, your factory floors, your living rooms, and front porches. You taught me, you tested me, and you shared with me your challenges and concerns about overcrowded or crumbling schools, about the struggle to care for growing children and aging parents, about the continuing challenge of providing equal opportunity for all, and about children moving away from their hometowns because good jobs are so hard to find in upstate New York. Now, I've worked on issues like these for a long time, some of them for 30 years, and I am determined to make a difference for all of you. You see, I believe our nation owes every responsible citizen and every responsible family the tools that they need to make the most of their own lives. That's the basic bargain I'll do my best to honor in the United States Senate. And to those of you who did not support me, I want you to know that I will work in the Senate for you and for all New Yorkers. And to those of you who worked so hard and never lost faith, even in the toughest times, I offer you my undying gratitude. I will work my heart out for you for the next 6 years, and I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the steady support of so many people. I want to thank Charlie Rangel, Nita Lowey, and the entire New York Democratic congressional delegation, my future colleagues. I'm very grateful for the support of our Democratic statewide elected officials and my good friends, Carl McCall and Eliot Spitzer. I want to thank Shelley Silver and all the Democratic Assembly members, and Marty Connor and all the Democratic members of the state Senate. I want to thank all of my upstate friends who couldn't be here tonight, including Tony Masiello, Bill Johnson, Jerry Jennings, Mike Breslin, Mark Thomas, all the county chairs and other elected officials. And thank you to all of my downstate friends, Andy Spano and the county chairs and all the elected officials, and particularly my friends right here in New York City, the citywide officials, the borough presidents, the city council members, and two great friends, former mayors Ed Koch and David Dinkins.
Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton, having made history by being the first Lady elected to a major office, the United States Senate. Let's take a look now at the numbers. 66% of the precincts reporting, and I didn't call out the numbers.
This is the key, I think, one of the keys, Judy, that in the presidential race, Al Gore is running, even now, 1 million votes ahead of George Bush. She was running about 500,000 votes ahead of Rick Lazio.
60% there for Gore and 35% for Bush. I was talking and couldn't digest the numbers that we just showed in the Senate race.
Well, can we see them again?
Here they are. This is the
Gore-Bush
Gore-Bush race, where he's running at least 1 million votes ahead with 2/3 of the precincts in, and Hillary has about a margin of 500,000 so far. This should remind a lot of people of the last out-of-stater who came to New York and won, Robert Kennedy in 1964, who won by 750,000 votes, while Lyndon Johnson was beating Barry Goldwater by more than 2.5 million votes. These are two races, then and now, where coattails may have helped.
All right, there are the Senate numbers again with 68% of the precincts reporting Hillary Clinton, 56% of the vote to Lazio's 44. As Jeff said, it's about a 500,000 vote margin for the First Lady.
Yeah, which suggests that not only did she choose a good state to run in, because New York has 2 million more Democrats registered than Republicans, but she chose a good year to run. In a presidential year, where a candidate like Al Gore can pile up a big majority, she does have coattails to ride. If this weren't a presidential year, she might have had a much tougher time winning New York.
But that's a pretty significant margin. I mean, who knows whether it will hold, but this is 2/3 of the precincts reporting, and she's got a 12 percentage point margin.
Money, money, money. More than $21 million spent.
That's right.
Yes, but barely, that's about 1/3 as much as was spent by one candidate in New Jersey. Often New Jersey is said to have an inferiority complex. When it comes to spending money in a U.S. Senate race, boy, New Jersey can hold its head up high and say to New York, you guys are minor leaguers compared to what we did.
That's John Corzine.
John Corzine, because New Jersey has two of the most expensive media markets in the country. To run in New Jersey, you have to advertise in New York and you have to advertise in Philadelphia. Those are expensive markets, and John Corzine spent about $60 million, more than any candidate in history, to win that Senate seat.
We should repeat a news item that we reported several hours ago. Libby Pataki, wife of the governor, went on radio earlier today.
Let me interrupt you, Jeff.
Sorry?
CNN is going to make a call in the Southwest, an important call. Colorado has been won by Governor Bush. Governor Bush taking Colorado's 8 electoral votes. Please continue.
So let's see, the total then is 225 George W. Bush to 231. Who said this wasn't going to be a close night, a close election?
Yeah,
it is a close election.
Colorado is the state that switched from Clinton in 1992 to Dole in 1996. So it could have gone either way, and it looks like it stuck with the Republicans as it did with Bob Dole.
And those people who were saying a week ago you would be waiting for Wisconsin, waiting for Iowa, waiting for Florida, waiting for Arkansas, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, Arizona.
And we have to keep looking, I think, at the Nader numbers. You know, Colorado is not one of the states that Nader was presumed to be a threat in, but those states that are still in yellow, Arizona, Oregon, Washington,
Wisconsin.
Skip over to Wisconsin.
Here's the list.
Here's the list. Ralph Nader is a factor, not in every single one of them, but in
at least
several
4.
of them.
In
at
Wisconsin,
least 4 of them.
Washington, Oregon, Iowa, and Maine for that 1 electoral vote. These are states where Nader may make a difference. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the year 2000, where the presidency of the United States will be decided by states, it's fair to say, many of whom have not had this kind of power in past presidential elections.
That's right, because and even Alaska, which hasn't even closed its polls yet. It's the last state that hasn't closed.
But which we can fairly well expect to go Republican, since it
always goes Republican.
Right.
And that's, what, 4 electoral votes in Alaska?
No, just 3. Just 3.
3.
Big state, not many people.
One of the leaders of Congress watching all that's happening very, very closely is the man from Mississippi, the Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott. When we come back, we're going to sit down and talk with him, or he'll sit down and talk with us, and we'll take a look at the balance of power beneath this great, majestic dome, the United States Capitol building, as CNN's live coverage of Election 2000 returns in a moment.
We're watching the presidential race. We're also watching a number of Senate, House, and governor races. Very important. Let's go right to our balance of power man tonight, Wolf Blitzer.
Judy, a very close race in Washington State right now. The incumbent senator, the Republican Slade Gorton, and the former Congresswoman Maria Cantwell. Too close to call. That race we're going to be counting votes on to see who wins. Let's take a look at the balance of power in the Senate as of this minute. What we know, there were 35 Republican holdovers, 31 Democratic holdovers. The Republicans so far tonight have won 14 states. The Democrats have won 15 states. That brings the total, the Republican total right now, 49 Republican senators, 46 Democratic senators, 5 still undecided, those undecided being Michigan, Missouri, Nebraska, Montana, and Washington State. Stuart Rothenberg, so far one pickup for the Democrats tonight.
Well, a lot of the close contests are still out there, Wolf, but the Democrats have to go 5 for 5, and 4 of them would be takeovers. That's awfully difficult. And our viewers might be wondering about the presidential level in the Senate. As you know, as we noted, Missouri went for Governor Bush at the presidential level, but John Ashcroft is trailing him slightly, and Michigan, of course, has gone for Al Gore. Spencer Abraham is actually drawing a few more votes than George Bush did in that state.
All right, we'll be watching those 5 states. For now, back to Bernie on the national desk.
And Wolf, right up to Washington, the Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott. Mr. Lott, you're in Jackson, Mississippi. Let's put you in your home state. Trent Lott, you just heard Stu Rothenberg say that tonight the Democrats will have to go up 5 for 5 to snatch control of that senior body from your party. How do you see it going down? Tomorrow morning, will you wake up still in control of the United States Senate?
Well, I certainly hope so, Bernie, and it looks like we will be able to hold a majority. Of course, we've got to watch those races, and several of them may still be close, but if they have to sweep basically all of the seats that are left, I'd hope that that's not going to be likely. It's hard to tell right now whether we'll have a net pickup of 1 or a net loss of 2, but I believe that we will still be in the majority, and certainly I hope so. I appreciate the people of Mississippi re-electing me to the Senate, so I hope that we're working with the majority when we get there.
You never had any doubt about your re-election, did you?
Well, you never take it for granted, and I had not 1 but 4 opponents, and so anytime you've got 4, you got to watch it.
Any Senate races giving you a little heartburn or a lot of heartburn at this hour?
Well, I'm excited about a couple of them. I'm excited about George Allen, the former governor in Virginia, winning, and former Congressman John Ensign there in Nevada. Of course, I've been, very concerned about the situation in Missouri. It's just such a difficult set of circumstances for people to deal with on both sides of both parties.
Let me interrupt you for a moment. A federal judge ruled that the polls in St. Louis could stay open until 10 their time. They closed about 21 minutes ago. Is that what you're alluding to? Because Kit Bond was he was just furious that the Democrats in St. Louis could pull this off, as he indicated.
Yeah. Well, that did seem like an unusual set of circumstances, that they would come in at the last minute and keep polls open longer and only in that one place, but not in the rest of the state. I understood that it had gone first that they were going to be open, then they couldn't be open, but it just tells you a little bit of something about what's been happening in Missouri. John Ashcroft, John is a great guy, and I hope he wins. He's been a good senator, and he also is a part of our Singing Senators Quartet. We need him.
Senator, let me interrupt you for a moment. CNN is declaring another race in Nevada. Governor Bush wins 4 more electoral votes. He picks up Nevada's 4 electoral votes. And this is the tally as it stands now. Can it get any closer? Vice President Gore with 230 electoral votes. Governor Bush with 229 electoral votes. Trent Lott, you are one of the masterful vote counters in the United States Senate. How do you see this breaking down, say, over the next hour?
Well, looking at the maps that are still, I guess, yellow on your national map, the ones that haven't been clearly decided, I have the impression Arkansas will go for Bush. I still believe Florida will go for Bush. I'm hoping and thinking maybe Iowa will go for Bush. Plus, I believe you still have a couple other states out west, maybe Oregon, that might go for Bush. So it looks like it's still going to be very close. And I'm used to counting votes in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, but I haven't counted them in electoral colleges.
What do you make of Wisconsin? Arizona?
Well, What did you call there?
We've not called it. We've not called. Yeah. This is what we've not called. We've not called Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Iowa, Nevada, Maine.
We just called Nevada.
Just called Nevada, pardon me. Oregon, Washington, Wisconsin. There's one electoral vote, of course, in Maine. And Alaska closes in less than 45 minutes.
Well, and Alaska certainly will be for Bush, and I believe the first 5 you named there will probably all go for Bush. Wisconsin looks like we have a good chance there. You've got an outstanding governor, Tommy Thompson. Governor Bush had been looking pretty good there, but that's a state that Republicans don't always win, as you know, on a national level, and that would be a great victory.
Senator, it's Jeff Greenfield. You're looking at a popular vote that is almost dead even. You're looking at an electoral vote that is almost dead even. People always wonder when a race is this close, when a country in effect really is tied. What sort of mandate can a new president have when he wins, whichever one of these fellows wins, by such a small percentage?
Well, I don't know that you would have a sweeping mandate, but I think that the attitude of the American people is we will come together behind the winner. Obviously, I hope that it's George W. Bush. I believe he will bring a new atmosphere and a new approach to how we do business there. But even if it's not Governor Bush, if it's Vice President Gore, he'll be a new man, and there'll be a spirit of effort to cooperate, try to get things done for the best interests of our country. So while you may not have a sweeping mandate, it's going to be different in Washington. It's going to be different without Clinton in the presidency.
Senator, have you thought, it's Judy Woodruff, have you thought about the possibility of a tie in the electoral vote? We realize that the odds are against it, but have you and some of your colleagues talked about that?
Actually, we have not talked about it. I have seen some speculation about that in the media, the idea that I guess there could be a tie of 269 to 269. I don't believe that's going to happen. I still believe that Governor Bush will wind up getting somewhere in the range of 285 to 295, something like that.
Trent Lott, explain to us the credibility that Governor Bush would have if he is elected tonight, coming to Washington, having run as an outsider.
Well,
unquote.
Actually,
unquote.
Yeah. Well, that's happened many times before. That was true with Jimmy Carter. That was true with Ronald Reagan. That was true with Bill Clinton. And it'll be true with George W. Bush. But he'll bring a new atmosphere. I think he is going to try to bring us together. It'll be incumbent upon people like myself to work with him and to make sure that he understands how the Senate does business and that we understand what he really wants to achieve. I think we need to reach out to the Democrats and say, what can we do together for our country? I mean, Medicare reform, we need it. We know we need it. We've got to provide prescription drugs for our seniors that can't afford it. Let's quit trying to see what we can disagree on, and let's see if we can find 2 or 3 really big things. Churchill would want us to do that. He would say, find a few big things and focus on that. You know, we've got a lot to be proud of. The economy is good. We don't have a war right now in the world. We have balanced the budget. We are reducing the debt. We have cut taxes some, but we need to do more in that area. So we need to take that next step to deal with Social Security and Medicare reform, do some repairs to our defense that has been damaged by the last few years of the Clinton-Gore administration, and we need to do more in returning some of the tax dollars to working Americans. If we could just do those 4 big things, I think that would be really good for the country, and continue to pay down the debt and balance the budget.
Speaking of reforms, given what still might happen tonight, do you think it is time really now to look at the Electoral College and do something about that, or are you content with this system?
Well, we've talked about doing that in the past. I remember when I was in the House of Representatives years ago, probably in the 70s, we thought about it. There have been some scholars that have talked about how we maybe need to change that, but the person that wins with the Electoral College vote will probably say, this system works pretty well. Our forefathers did a pretty good job, and while I, have difficulty explaining even to my own wife why you could win the popular vote but lose the Electoral College vote and how that wouldn't be fair, I think the system still works pretty well. It has over 200 years, and before we change it, I think we need to be real careful and think about it long and hard. But I don't put it outside the realm of possibilities. I think you always need to ask yourself, Is this the best we can do, or should we consider changing it?
All right. Senator Trent Lott, the Republican leader of the United States Senate, we thank you very much for joining us from
the
your
majority
home.
leader, Judy.
Did I say minority?
No, you said Republican. No, you said Republican,
leader,
but I still like majority.
All right, we'll call you majority. There's no reason not to call you that. Both the Republican leader and the majority leader. Trent Lott, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate that.
Bipartisanship already.
Absolutely. We are keeping an eye as we go to a break on so many states that we just don't have a call yet on. And we're going to talk some more about that when we come back. Just after 11:30 on the East Coast, the polls have closed in every state but one, and that is Alaska. We want to show you some important states that we are not able to call yet. The raw vote totals, 74% of the precincts reporting in the state of Florida. George W. Bush with 51% of the vote, a little over 2 million. Al Gore with 47%, 1.9 million. Another state that's still out there, too close to call, Wisconsin, 47% of the precincts reporting, and look at that, a tie, 48% to 48%. And yet another state we are not able to call, Iowa, with 63% of the precincts reporting. Al Gore leading 50% to 47% for George W. Bush. Hal Bruno is taking a closer look at some of these states tonight. Hal, what about Iowa? Put your spyglass there on the state of Iowa and tell us what's going on the ground.
Well, with almost 2/3 of the vote in, it is surprisingly close. And the reason for it is George Bush is doing better than anyone expected he would be doing in Des Moines, which should be the Democratic stronghold. Now, Bush is doing very well out here in the West. That's expected from a Republican. Al Gore is doing fine out here in the East, which is expected of a Democrat. And Al Gore is doing okay in the central part, but George Bush is doing better than expected. And that's what's making Iowa so close. Now you go out to the state of Washington, and you get the reverse type of thing happening. In Washington, Al Gore is doing very well, not only in the Seattle area, where you expect him to, but George Bush is not doing as strong as he should in the East, which is like the Midwest in terms of the lifestyle and agriculture and so on. That should be strong Republican territory. Bush is winning it, but not as much as he should. And Gore is doing very well over here in the East Coast, along through the Olympic Mountains. Now, going to Oregon. Now, one more thing about Washington before we leave it. Don't forget, half the ballots there are coming in by mail, so we don't know what's going to happen with those. All right, going to Oregon. Oregon, again, is all mail. They're just starting to count now.
M-A-I-L.
Yeah, all right, that's right. Yeah, postage. Anyhow, Al Gore is doing very well in the Portland suburbs, which is exactly what a Democrat is supposed to do. And George Bush is doing very good out here in the South and the East, which a Republican is supposed to do. But what we don't know is this area here along the coast, and we don't know at this point what the Nader factor is going to be. Oregon could be Ralph Nader's strongest state.
And again, that is, Hal, not based on exit polls, because there were no voters to poll. They didn't go to the polling places today. As you just said, they mailed in all their ballots, or they dropped them off at selected points around the state of Oregon today.
Yeah, and the important thing about Oregon is that they count those ballots immediately, and they have to be in by today, whereas in the state of Washington, they merely have to be postmarked by midnight today.
And how long could it be, Hal, before we know the results, the final result from the state of Washington?
Well, that's our nightmare scenario that we've discussed. It could be days. There was one election there where somebody won a congressional seat, went to Washington. They had to call him back 3 or 4 days later to tell him he had lost.
Al Bruno, thank you. Wow. In Washington, Mary Madeline, Mike McCurry. It's 11:35 Eastern Time, and it occurs to me that we began this broadcast at 5 p.m. Eastern Time saying, turn out, turn out, turn out. Mike?
You know, usually by this time on election night, I've been crying in my beer somewhere because the Democrats have lost, but this really is a cliffhanger. I'll tell you one thing. All the speculation about Ralph Nader and his impact is coming home to roost now. If it comes down to Wisconsin, Washington, Oregon, those states that probably should be safely in Al Gore's column, if they are not, a large part of the reason may be because people have voted for Ralph Nader, and in my editorial comment, thrown their vote away, in a sense. But if that is not the case, then really the story is going to be turnout, 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 and Al Gore's campaign has worked very, very hard these last 72 hours. I sensed, in fact, that in a way, Governor Bush's campaign was coasting to the finish line. They were, you know, they took a day off last Sunday. They acted like they had it in the bag. They put out a schedule for tomorrow that had the president-elect's schedule, and I think they took a lot for granted. The Gore people out-hustled them a lot of places. That's why we have a much closer election.
Mary?
Well, of course, the Bush campaign took nothing for granted, and the schedule they put out tomorrow was a boost to the staff. Look, anyone who questions the hustle of the Bush campaign, or in particular the strategy of spreading their resources over so many Democratic states, which had been questioned, can now consider the genius of Karl Rove. If it wasn't for our picking up the Republicans and Bush picking up so many of these Democratic states, he would not be ahead right now. But still suggesting that, and they've been confident all night long, that Florida was going to remain in their column. So this was from the beginning a very long marathon effort, as Governor Bush said, and it was the most superior ground game ever envisioned and executed on in the Republican Party. And you know, let me say something about Nader. This is what the Republicans said about Ross Perot when he kicked our hiney all over the place. Nader exists as a weakness of the Gore candidacy, as a segment, a very deep segment of the Democratic Party that hasn't been addressed in the Clinton administration. And ironically, Gore moved to the left to try to meet the demands of that segment, but turned off, it looks like, some independent voters.
But no, that's not true. Nader exists as a figment of someone's imagination that somehow or another there was not a difference between Gore and Bush. There were very serious differences about how either of these candidates would populate federal government, the kinds of policies they would pursue, and if anything, we didn't spend enough time talking about the substantive differences between these candidates, which would, I think, it made a big, big difference in the way some of those Nader voters reacted with their votes today.
You know, you can't. The candidates talked endlessly, ceaselessly, every day about their differences, and Bush made it very clear, and this is one of his winning arguments, that Gore was for expanding government. He made that argument, and it pushed him ahead through the debates and after the debates, and Gore made his argument every day that we want to have, they used to say, a chicken in every pot, we want to have a program for every person. So the distinctions were clear. I don't know what Mike's talking about.
Well, the distinctions weren't clear to those Nader voters that I think may have helped elect George Bush, if that's the way it comes out at the end of the day. And hopefully that ground war that's still underway out west will make a difference for the vice president.
Well, on that ground war, tactically, obviously, both you people are biting your fingernails, along with people in the campaigns in Austin and Nashville. What do you say has to happen for each of your men to win? Mary?
Well, since I got a manicure today, I haven't been biting my fingernails.
They got to get more votes.
They have to look. You know what I love about this is, this is the oldest fashioned thing in politics. All this fancy media, record-breaking expenditures on paid media. It gets down to what we used to do 25, 30 years ago. Call up people and say, did you vote yet? Oh, I'm coming by to pick you up. You will vote. It's good old-fashioned politics, and it says to people out there, your vote counts. Every vote counts. I think this is very, very healthy for the electorate. It really could help diminish the cynicism about the political process.
Right. And I hope it really does demonstrate maybe at the end of the day that turnout has gone up somewhat, too. I agree with Mary that this is going to be an election that reminds everyone of how important that constitutional responsibility of voting is all about.
Mary, just a quick question. As I hear you talking about Ralph Nader, you know, so often we heard George W. Bush and the people around him say that Al Gore was the epitome of big spending, liberal, and so forth. And yet, is there some contradiction when Ralph Nader is there to the left of Al Gore?
Well, I guess it points out what we Republicans have often said about the Democratic Party. You can never get too big. And I'm really predicting whatever happens with Al Gore, Nader's presence, and particularly if it's clear that he's made an impact on this election, will nudge the party even further left. This promises to be as exciting a post-campaign debate as the whole campaign was.
Well, on that point, Nader said a short while ago, Larry King interviewed him earlier, shortly past 10 o'clock this week, we become a viable watchdog party. But a question, a point you were making earlier, Mary, Ralph Nader has set a pox on both your houses. He doesn't think either Gore or Bush cuts the mustard.
Well, that was, I believe, a cynical strategy of his. Clearly, there were huge differences, and in the end, he was saying, he sort of got in cahoots with Gephardt and the other Democratic leaders to say, vote for Democratic congressmen and senators. He knows there's a huge difference between them, but he was appealing to that kind of Ventura, that maverick, that independent voter who really does have a cynical view about politics in general. Very cynical on behalf of Ralph Nader, but he knows there's a huge difference.
I would just remind everyone who voted for Ralph Nader, if over the next 4 years they have to watch George Bush appoint people to the Supreme Court and to all of the sub-cabinet positions, all of those positions in OSHA and EPA and regulatory agencies that really count in our system of government. They watch how those positions are filled versus how Al Gore would have filled them, then they'll know how they spent their vote this election night.
You know, I think a lot of people voted for Bush because of what he is going to bring into government. Those people that he brought with him on the campaign trail, notably Colin Powell, who will be a typical kind of appointee in a Bush administration.
All right, Mary Madeline, Mike McCurry. We've seen you several times. We're going to see you several times more before this night is over. It is, what, 18 minutes before the bewitching hour of midnight Eastern Time, and we're still counting. There are still 7 states, and Jeff Greenfield has his hand in front of my face, so he wants to say something. Jeff.
Oh, I'm sorry to be so impolite, but you know, I just want to point out something a little ahead of time, thanks to our staff. If Al Gore picks up Iowa and the one electoral vote out in Maine and Florida,
which I was about to say that we are giving Al Gore.
Okay, then
and
this...
I will formally announce. CNN announces, as we described earlier, Maine is one of the 2 states that can split its electoral vote by congressional district. We're now prepared to say that Al Gore has all 4 of Maine's electoral votes. So as you can see, the total there is 231
Is this total
Gore.
correct?
This
should
is
it be 232?
Or should it be 232? It was 231.
All right, 232 now.
Okay, now, so here's the point.
I stand corrected. I'm told that the 231 is correct.
Okay.
And just at 229, this is Governor Bush. And Jeff, keep talking.
If Al Gore wins Iowa, and Al Gore wins Florida, and George Bush wins Arkansas and Alaska, we have an electoral tie. 269, 269, no one with an electoral majority, and either they find an elector to defect or it goes to the House of Representatives.
There were more than 70 mathematical possibilities that could happen, I was told, and we may be facing one of them.
Right. A couple of people have asked me, can George Bush still win without Florida? And the answer is yes, he can. He's at 229 electoral votes right now, and there are still 54, I think without Maine, 53 electoral votes out. He needs 41 more to get 270. So he could win without carrying Florida, but he'd have to carry just about all of the rest of those states, 41 out of the 53 electoral votes in the remaining states, to do it.
This depends on a split that is mathematically tricky, because Oregon and Washington, I believe, have to also fall into Bush's column. But we are looking at a race that is so close, so late, that all of the pre-election predictions in this sense were accurate, which is to say it is unpredictable.
That's right.
Fascinating stuff, fascinating stuff. And if it is a tie, boy, are we going to have a good time talking about that.
There'll be a hunt for electors. Each side will be looking for electors because look, you know, in December, the electors meet in their respective state capitals to vote. So each side will claim a moral victory if they edged out the other in popular votes, and they'll try to get an elector to defect to the winning side in the popular vote.
They won't let it stay a tie, is what you're saying.
They're going to try not to let it stay a tie because they're going to say morally the person who got the most votes from the people should win. They're going to have to find an elector who will defect. Those electors are chosen for their loyalty.
But can you imagine the onus on the person who made the switch?
Well,
Jeff, how did the electors in your novel turn out?
Well, my novel wasn't quite as outrageous as what might happen with a tie. All I did was kill off the president-elect in a photo opportunity. But the fact of the matter is, the basis of all of this argument is that while states can try to punish electors who defect, fines and stuff, the Congress so far, when an elector has been faithless, has in fact said, no, we're going to count the vote. Now, it's never mattered. But there is some precedent to say if there's one of these electors, let's say Bush wins the popular vote, and one of these Gore electors says, you know, it's a tie, I think I should go with the popular vote winner, he can be ostracized, he'll probably never get a Democratic Party job, but they can't stop him from casting the vote. And it is a Congress in January that decides whether the vote is valid, and so far it looks like it'll be a Republican Congress.
I'm looking, speaking of a potential tie, I'm looking at the Republican pollster Alex Gage working with Fred Steeper, who predicted just this scenario about a week and a half ago, and he figured it out, and it is coming to fruition almost exactly as he predicted. Of course, there's still 6 or 7 states out,
including Florida.
Including Florida, which is a big one, and he had given that to Al Gore, and he still had a tie.
That's how it works out, and that if Bush takes Florida, not only will there be a lot of exit poll and people who may have a new job, but it won't happen.
Oh, boy.
Let me interrupt our conversation. Arizona now, CNN declares, goes to Governor Bush. Arizona's 8 electoral votes in the governor's column.
And that is a significant win because Arizona had voted Republican in every election from 1948 for since Harry Truman. It voted for Harry Truman, then it voted Republican in every election after that until it voted for Bill Clinton in 1996. And now it's gone back into the Republican column.
Home of John McCain. He represents that state in the United States Senate. And the primary there No surprise, John McCain beat
Yes.
George Bush by almost 25 points.
Yeah, actually what happened in Arizona is interesting because they have a lot of seniors who have retired and live in Arizona. It appears from our exit polling that they voted heavily for George Bush and they put him over. What carried the state for Bill Clinton in 1996 was a heavy vote among Hispanic Americans who voted very heavily Democratic. So you had a Hispanic Democratic vote and a senior vote that was heavily Republican. It appears that the seniors have won it this time.
But what'll be interesting to find out is why it took so long to fall into the Bush column. It'll be interesting to look at those numbers.
We do have the senior vote in Arizona. Let's take a look at what our exit poll showed among voters over 65 in Arizona. They were the key to the Bush victory. 57% of them voted for Bush, 40% for Gore. Now remember that the Social Security issue, the Medicare issue, the prescription drugs issue was supposed to pay off handsomely for Al Gore among seniors. Certainly didn't work that way in Arizona because the seniors in Arizona voted very strongly for George Bush and delivered that state to him. So don't take the senior vote for granted. Even for the Democrats this year, Social Security issue didn't work the way a lot of people predicted.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from, or talk with, I should say, the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives, Dennis Hastert. We'll be back in a moment.
The United States of America still does not have a new president at this late hour. Back and forth, nip and tuck. The governor and the vice president have traded the electoral lead. Right now, Governor Bush has gone back up on top, 237 electoral votes to Vice President Gore's 231. This is the electoral map as it stands. This is the raw vote, with 66% of precincts reporting. You can see that Governor Bush has 49% of the vote, or roughly 34.2 million votes, to Vice President Gore's 48%, or 33.7 million votes.
Running as the closest since Humphrey and Nixon in 1968, Bernie.
That's right, and if that was 66% of the vote, that was about 68 million votes. So it looks like we're going to have a little over 100 million voters casting ballots. It's a little higher than usual, but not spectacularly high.
Wolf Blitzer, race is underway in the House. What's the latest?
We're taking a close look at the House races. There's one net pickup we can report right now. In Long Island, Felix Grucci, the Republican, beating Regina Seltzer. This was the seat that Michael Forbes lost in the Democratic primary. He's the former Republican who turned Democratic. Let's take a look at what we can report on the balance of power in the House of Representatives right now. Very, very close so far. If you take a look at all the numbers, they're still undecided, and there's still about only about 3/4 of the seats have been determined right now. So far, we can say the Republicans have a net gain of 2 seats. We're still waiting, Stuart Rothenberg, for some seats out of the West Coast, though.
Not just the West Coast, Wolf. We've got 2 squeakers in Jersey, one in West Virginia, one in Scranton, one in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where Heather Wilson is in trouble. All across the country, we've got a lot of close ones.
We're going to be watching all of those races right now. Back to the national desk.
All right, Wolf Blitzer, Stu Rothenberg, joining us from Aurora, Illinois, his hometown, the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Dennis Hastert. Mr. Speaker, thank you for being with us. As you hear this analysis from Stu and Wolf, what's your reaction? Republicans 2 up net at this point, but we're still waiting for some important races to come in.
Well, we're cautiously optimistic. We have been able to defend our seats in Kentucky and North Carolina that we thought that we may have a challenge. We have an interesting race in Connecticut that we may pick up a seat that we didn't expect, and you know, we have to go in. I think we're doing as well as we can expect. It's going to be a long night. We have to see what happens in California, obviously, but I feel good about the position that we're in.
When do you think you'll have a sense of what the new House is going to look like?
Well, it might be early tomorrow morning before we really know what the
how early or how late, I should say.
I wish I know. I guess we're all looking at that crystal ball. Yeah. It probably won't be much before we determine who the new president's going to be.
Well, speaking of that, we're looking at a very close race. Are you surprised, Mr. Speaker, that we're looking at a race with, what, 49% to 48% of the popular vote and just a few, what is it, 231 Gore to 237 Bush in the electoral vote at this point?
Well, we just figured that this was going to be a tough race. We knew it was going to be close. We figured it was going to be close in the House. It was going to be close in the Senate. It was going to be close in the presidency. Nobody, obviously, in this election period was running away with it, but we've tried to get our themes out there, talking about balancing the budget and paying down the debt and a better education for our kids, and that have been pretty well united thematically, and I think that appeals to people.
No matter what happens from here on out, it's clear that this country is divided in a big way in terms of its view, not only of the man it wants to lead the country for the next 4 years, but in terms of philosophy. That being the case, how can the House of Representatives and the Senate do business with a president when the mandate seems to be so split here?
Well, you know, that's why we need, both in the House of Representatives and the Senate and in the presidency, to try to bring people together. You know, the important issues, education, health care, are things that should be partisan. They ought to be bipartisan. And we need to be able to bring our arms together and get those things done. You know, 90% of the issues in health care people agree on. We ought to be able to split the difference in the other 3% and get it done.
And Mr. Speaker, when you say it needs to be bipartisan, are you saying that all the fault lies with the other party here?
I'm not pointing the finger at anybody tonight. It was pretty evident in the House of Representatives this year that the strategy of the Democrats is to try to block everything so that they could run against a do-nothing Congress. We didn't let that happen, but it was awful tough to get anything done when that was the strategy.
All right, House Speaker Dennis Hastert joining us from his hometown of Aurora, Illinois. We want to thank you very much for being with us, and we look forward to
been my pleasure
talking with you very soon again once we know more about what the outcome of the House of Representatives will be. We are going to take a break. And we'll be right back with much more coverage in about 2.5 minutes. The last state, the polls close in the state of Alaska. We'll be back in a moment. And with that call.